Put on your woolen hats, find the warmest mittens, and go buy the thickest blankets. The next ice age might be just around the corner. And the trigger is much more shocking than anyone might have expected. What's even worse? We have no control over our bitterly cold future. Earth's climate has been on a wild ride for millions of years. It's been warming up, freezing over into ice ages, then heating up again to the more normal temperatures we know today. These cycles, called quaternary ice ages, are part of a much longer pattern of global freezing and thawing. For a long time, scientists thought Earth's orbit around the Sun had something to do with triggering ice ages, but figuring out exactly how was tricky. Well, new research has finally connected the dots. It shows how tiny changes in Earth's tilt, wobble, and orbit mess with the growth and melting of huge ice sheets. This is a pretty big deal because it helps scientists understand not just what happened in the past, but also what might happen to our climate in the future. Even small shifts in how Earth moves through space can have huge effects over thousands of years. These changes control how much sunlight different parts of the planet get, which affects how ice sheets grow and shrink. Earth doesn't orbit the Sun in a perfect circle. It actually follows a slightly oval-shaped path. This phenomenon is called orbital eccentricity. Since the Sun isn't sitting right in the center of this oval, Earth's distance from it changes throughout the year. Plus, the oval itself slowly shifts position in space over time, which is called orbital precession. On top of that, Earth's tilt, aka obliquity, also changes slightly as our planet moves around the Sun. Scientists have known for a while that these orbital quirks impact our planet's climate, causing cycles of warming and cooling. As different parts of Earth's orbit shift, they change how sunlight is distributed across the planet, influencing seasons and ice ages. These Milankovitch cycles happen roughly every 20,000, 40,000, 100,000, and even 400,000 years. The difficult part is to figure out how each of these orbital changes affects climate shifts. Earth's climate is a complicated system, with tons of factors influencing it at the same time. Modeling all these processes is no easy task. It needs huge computing power and a deep understanding of each factor's role in shaping our planet's past and future climate. There are two cycles that are super close to each other in timing. Precession, which happens every 21,000 years, and the second harmonic of obliquity that happens at 20,500 years. But even though they're so close, no one has been able to directly connect either of these cycles to the end of an ice age. On top of that, for the past 800,000 years, ice ages have ended every 100,000 years. And scientists to the bottom of it, researchers turned to the deep sea. They studied changes in oxygen isotope ratios found in the tiny, fossilized shells of marine creatures. These tiny creatures live in the ocean, and their exoskeletons preserve clues about past climate, specifically changes in ice sheets. This allowed the researchers to track the beginning and end of ice ages over the past 800,000 years. By comparing the changes in the ice sheets with Earth's orbital changes, they found an incredible pattern. The key moments when Earth moved between ice ages and warmer periods were perfectly lined up with specific relationships between precession and obliquity. It turns out that the end of an ice age, called deglaciation, is closely linked to the way precession and obliquity align. But it's obliquity alone that seems to trigger the start of an ice age. This discovery is the key to understanding the 100,000-year cycle of ice ages. The researchers say it was always there, just waiting to be noticed. Before the discovery, people thought the timing of ice ages was more random. But this new study shows there's a clear, predictable pattern. This means we might actually be able to predict when ice ages will happen in the future. Right now, Earth's tilt is slowly decreasing, and in about 11,000 years, it'll hit its lowest point. Based on the team's calculation, the next ice age is expected to begin before then. At the same time, According to the latest reports, humans have already started pushing Earth's climate off its natural path by releasing greenhouse gases. Another thing scientists are warning about is a massive shift that's happening in the Atlantic Ocean, and it could drastically change the world's climate. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation is a system of ocean currents that moves warm and cold water around the planet. And right now, it is showing signs of weakening. What will happen if it collapses? Freezing temperatures in Europe, extreme weather across the world, shifting monsoons, and even an Amazon rainforest drying up. And the scariest part? Some researchers say there's a 95% chance this could happen before the end of the century. Think of the AMOC like a giant conveyor belt in the ocean. Warm, salty water from the tropics flows north towards Europe and North America. When it reaches colder areas, it cools down, becomes heavier, and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. This deep, cold water then moves southward, while fresh, warm water from the equator keeps flowing north to replace it. This system helps regulate global temperatures, keeps Europe's winters mild, and prevents the US East Coast from flooding. It also controls monsoon patterns that bring seasonal rain to parts of Africa, South America, and Asia. Without it, the world's climate would look completely different. Right now, melting ice from Greenland and Antarctica, along with increased rainfall and river runoff, is dumping too much fresh water into the North Atlantic. Since fresh water is lighter than seawater, it disrupts the sinking process that keeps the AMOC moving. If too much fresh water builds up, it will mess up the entire system. And once it collapses, there will be no reversing it, even if the climate later cools down. Scientists have seen two big warning signs. First of all, the warming of the ocean off the US East Coast, which suggests the AMOC is already slowing down. Plus, there's a cold blob of water south of Greenland. It might be a sign of the weakening of the ocean current, and that's exactly what happens before the system fails. What would happen if the AMOC fully shut down? Europe would enter an ice age. The AMOC plays an important role in keeping Europe's winters relatively mild by bringing warm water north. If this process stopped, Europe would be plunged into deep winter. London's climate would drop by 18 degrees Fahrenheit, making it feel like northern Canada. Stockholm could get up to 54 degrees Fahrenheit colder, turning it into Siberia-like conditions. And snow and ice would cover much of northern Europe year-round. Next, monsoons would shift, leading to severe droughts. The AMOC helps regulate tropical rainfall, especially in Africa, South America, and Asia. If it collapsed, West Africa's monsoons would shift or disappear, leading to devastating droughts and a massive food crisis. The Amazon rainforest could dry up, transforming into a savanna or grassland. In India and Southeast Asia, monsoon rains would disappear, and millions of people rely on them for agriculture. The US East Coast could see catastrophic flooding. With the AMOC weakening, water is already piling up along the US East Coast, triggering higher sea levels and stronger hurricanes. If the system shut down, sea levels would rise by up to 3.2 feet, which would make the coastal cities more vulnerable to flooding. Finally, hurricanes and extreme storms could become even more powerful because of warmer waters along the coast. Now, how close are we to disaster? For thousands of years, the AMOC has remained stable, but recent studies suggest it's weaker now than at any point in the past 1,600 years. Ocean temperatures are hitting record highs, and many researchers believe we are dangerously close to the tipping point. A study published in Nature claims that if greenhouse gas emissions continue at their current pace, there's a 95% chance that the AMOC will collapse before 2100.
Did you know that the Pleistocene era was a really important time in Earth's history? It's when the last ice age happened, and glaciers covered a lot of the planet. This period of time lasted for about 2.6 million years and ended around 11,700 years ago. What's even cooler is that modern humans, like us, had actually evolved during this time and had spread all over Earth before it ended. There were also some really fascinating animals that lived during the Pleistocene, like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. Unfortunately, many of them went extinct at the end of this era. Earth has had some pretty wild weather patterns over the last 2.4 billion years. Although the planet is mostly ice-free, we now cycle in and out of freezing ice ages. During these glacial periods, temperatures drop and huge areas of the planet get covered in ice. It all starts with a bit of snow, which then builds up over time. The ice reflects sunlight, making things even cooler. The result? Vast glaciers that slowly move toward the equator, changing the landscape as they go. And when the ice melts, sea levels rise again, and everything changes all over again. In total, there have been at least 5 ice ages so far. The first one was so intense that the whole planet turned into a huge snowball. Right now, we're actually in the middle of an ice age, but we're currently in a temporary warm spell that started around 11,000 years ago. These warm periods are called interglacials, and we're not quite sure how long they last. There are still massive ice sheets covering Antarctica and Greenland that hold 75% of Earth's fresh water. When these finally melt, it'll mark the end of the current ice age. Earth's temperature is affected by something called the Milankovitch cycles. Basically, the amount of heat we receive from the sun changes over years, decades, and millennia because of Earth's orbit, tilt, and axis angle. There are 3 different patterns to these cycles. The first is called eccentricity, which is all about the shape of our orbit. The second is obliquity, which has to do with the tilt of the Earth. And the third is precession, which is like a wobble as Earth spins. Depending on where we are in these cycles, we might experience colder or warmer temperatures. But other things, like the position of continents and the atmosphere, also play a role in our planet's fate. For example, our planet's orbit is not quite circular. It's actually a bit elongated, shaped almost like an egg. That means we're sometimes a little closer or farther from the sun, depending on the time of year. We call the point farthest away from the sun the apogee, and the closest point is the perigee. When we're at the apogee, we're moving away from the sun, but gravity eventually pulls us back toward it. This means our orbit changes a little each time, gradually shifting our position relative to the sun. Don't worry, even though the orbit changes over thousands of years, it doesn't have a big impact on our day-to-day lives. Changes in Earth's orbit can affect how much sunlight we get during the summer. This means that ice sheets in the northern hemisphere will melt less, and over time, they actually start to grow. As they grow, they reflect even more sunlight, which makes the climate even cooler and spreads the ice even farther. This process can last for a really long time, like 10,000 to 20,000 years, and eventually it brings the planet into its next freezing season. As for the next ice age, scientists believe it might be postponed indefinitely. They've found that our human interaction with the environment, like the use of fuels, could delay the next ice age by up to 100,000 years. Earth's past ice ages were linked to the amount of solar radiation and carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, and this research can even help us predict future cycles. It's amazing to think that our actions now could affect Earth's future for thousands of years to come. And while it's not really important when the next ice age begins, it's pretty cool to know that humans have the power to shape the future on a geological timescale. Ice ages have had a huge impact on our planet and human civilization. So it's fascinating to think how our actions now might change things, maybe even for the better. What did life look like on our planet during the last ice age, though? Well, North America, for instance, was home to some huge creatures: mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and mastodons were just a few of them. And get this, even Europe had an 11-foot tall flightless bird that weighed almost as much as a polar bear. Meanwhile, down under in Australia, there was a giant lizard that lived in all sorts of habitats during the same time period. Even though some animals from the Pleistocene era aren't around anymore, you might recognize many of those that are still around today. In Alaska, for example, you can still find brown bears, caribou, and wolves. People just like us actually lived through the Ice Age too. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been around for about 300,000 years. And we've spread all around the world since then. Some of our ancestors stayed in Africa during the Ice Age and didn't feel the full effects of the cold. And others ventured out into other parts of the world, even into the chilly glacial environments of Europe. Our early relatives, like the Neanderthals in Europe, and the mysterious Denisovians in Asia, were also around during this time. Although they seem to have gone extinct before the end of the Ice Age, it's pretty amazing to think about all those different hominids that roamed Earth during that period. What's also fascinating is how our species managed to survive the Ice Age, while some of our cousins didn't. Some experts believe that our adaptability, social and communication skills, and the use of tools played a huge role in it. And guess what? Humans didn't just hunker down during that time. We actually moved into new areas. Fossilized footprints found at White Sands National Park in New Mexico prove that humans have been in North America since at least 23,000 years ago. That's close to the peak of the last Ice Age. While a full-blown Ice Age might still be far away, there is a possibility of a mini Ice Age coming our way. Some scientists believe that in about 10 years, we might experience a significant drop in solar activity, leading to colder temperatures in the northern hemisphere. This could result in conditions similar to the Little Ice Age in the late 17th century, when the Thames River in the UK froze over. While scientists aren't quite sure what caused that cooling, it's fascinating to think about the potential changes. We've done it before, so we know that humans will most likely survive the next real Ice Age, even if we don't manage to figure out a way to stop the next freezing era. But it would come at a high cost. All the ice that would cover most of the northern hemisphere would have to come from oceans, which would cause the sea level to drop. This could mean more land for some countries, but it would also create other problems. Sea levels going down might seem like a great thing at first, but actually, it could lead to some challenges. Having been covered with salt water for thousands of years, the new land might not be very fertile. This means it wouldn't be great for growing crops, and we'd have to find other ways to feed ourselves. Back when humans first started out, there weren't many of us, and there was plenty of food. Now, with over 7 billion people on the planet, it's a different story. We'll need to be resourceful to make sure everyone has enough food to eat.
A huge power outage hit Spain, Portugal, and parts of southwest France all at once, leaving millions of people without electricity. It happened on Monday morning, April 28, 2025, and caused lots of problems. Airports couldn't function, trains stopped in places like Lisbon and Madrid, and some hospitals had to cancel surgeries because they had no power. Everything just came to a stop. No one is sure yet what caused the blackout, but the company in charge of Portugal's electricity said it might have been something strange called induced atmospheric vibration. That's a rare and weird thing that can happen in the sky and might mess with power systems. It occurs when substantial changes in temperature and wind mess with giant power lines, making them wiggle and shake in strange ways. These wobbles can confuse the power system and cause big problems. So, REN, the company that runs Portugal's electricity, first said that those weird wobbles might be the reason everything went dark. But later, they said that was not really what happened. According to Wren, the real reason for the blackout was a huge voltage change, like a power surge, in Spain's power grid. At that moment, Portugal was using electricity from Spain. When that enormous power fluctuation hit, it triggered automatic safety systems in Portugal. Those systems shut everything down to protect power plants. Sadly, it also caused a nationwide blackout. During extreme weather in Spain, the air temperature changes fast, and that makes immense power lines stretch or shrink like rubber bands. That changes how tight they are and how they move in the wind, which can mess with both their physical balance and the electricity flowing through them, making the entire system unstable. Some experts say that if things get bad enough, this can even break power lines, cause short circuits, or even damage the towers holding up the lines. That's why safety systems are always in place. They're supposed to shut parts of the grid down automatically to stop bigger disasters. During the blackout, something like a domino effect happened. When parts of the power grid shut down, it made other parts unstable too. Some of the big electricity generators couldn't handle the chaos and had to disconnect. And when you suddenly lose those big generators, the power system can't keep up. It's something like too many people needing electricity, but not enough of it being made. It can cause even more blackouts to spread fast. Nobody knows exactly what started the blackout. Some people wondered if it might have been a cyber attack, like someone messing with the system on purpose through computers. But officials from Spain and the European Commission said that there was no proof of that. Spain's electricity company made it clear. Cyber attack? Nope, that's not the problem. Still, one big reason so many places were hit is because Europe's power grids are all connected like one big web. Usually, that's a good thing, since if one country has a problem, another can help by sharing electricity. At the same time, everything has to stay super balanced. The amount of electricity being made must match how many people are using it. If even one part gets knocked out, it can mess things up for other parts nearby, especially if they were depending on it. In other words, when something big goes wrong, it can travel through that web and cause problems in lots of countries at once, just like what happened in this case. And it's not the first time this kind of thing has happened. Back in 2003, most of Italy had no power for 12 hours because of a problem with an electricity line connected to Switzerland. In 2006, overloading of lines coupled with low temperatures caused too much power to surge through Germany's grid, which ended up knocking out power in many parts of Europe. Anyway, speaking of the recent blackout, by Tuesday morning, things started getting better. Most of the lights came back on across the Iberian Peninsula. That's Portugal and Spain. All of Portugal had power again, and 99% of Spain did too. Now, the people in charge are trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, and how to make sure it never happens again. So yeah, power grids are awesome when they work. When things go wrong, they can go really wrong. Now, let's travel back into the past, to the year 2012. Long time ago, huh? That's when India had one of the biggest blackouts in history. More than 600 million people lost electricity. That's like half the country or the entire population of Europe. This huge mess happened when 3 enormous power grids all broke down at once. Yep, those very grids that move electricity around. So when they fail, the lights go out everywhere. Because of this, entire cities just stopped working. Trains couldn't move, water pumps stopped, traffic lights went dark, and people were stuck all over the place. In Delhi, the capital city, the metro shut down, and passengers had to be helped off the trains. Without traffic lights, the roads turned into giant traffic jams. The blackout hit 20 of India's 28 states, including big ones like Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and West Bengal. In West Bengal, around 200 miners got stuck underground because the elevator stopped working. Luckily, they were all rescued safely. Engineers worked all night to fix things, and by the next day, they managed to get the power back on for all 3 grids. In India, smaller power cuts happen a lot, especially in cities. That's because the country doesn't make enough electricity for everyone, and the equipment they use is pretty old. But a full grid collapse like this is rare. Before this, it happened in northern India back in 2001, So when it happened again in 2012, and across 3 grids no less, it was very important. Everything just shut down, and it showed how much the system needed fixing. But blackouts like these happened in Europe before, too. Back in 2006, something weird happened because people in Germany got cold. It was a chilly Saturday night, and families in northern Germany turned on their heaters all at once. This sudden spike in energy use put a huge load on the power grid. To make things worse, one major power cable had been turned off for a bit so a ship could pass under it. Ooh, talk about bad timing. The grid couldn't handle everything, and it started breaking down. First, Western Germany had blackouts. Then things started going wrong in France, where even the big French power company, EDF, couldn't keep up with demand. Before long, power was going out in Paris, its suburbs, and other parts of the country. Then the trouble spread to Italy, Spain, and Belgium, and even Morocco. Millions of homes were left without power. In France alone, about 5 million people were left in the dark. Trains stopped running, and fire crews got loads of calls from people stuck in elevators. One of the people in charge said the whole thing started falling apart like a house of cards. Country after country started pulling power from France, which only made things worse. To stop a total blackout across all of Europe, they had to shut down some electricity for a short while on purpose. Over in Italy, the lights went out in both northern and southern regions. This country often imports electricity from other places, so it got hit hard. A few years earlier, in 2003, most of Italy had gone dark during another big blackout. Belgium had its own problems, while Spain saw power cuts in some of their larger cities. Even trains and high-speed rail had to stop in some places. It all started because too many people needed electricity at the same time, and the European power network couldn't keep up. Experts later said that the whole thing showed just how badly Europe needed to update and fix its old electricity systems to stop something like this.
Hey, want to take a wild trip back in time to the Jurassic or Cambrian era? Trust me, it's going to be a wild ride, but surviving in those ancient environments would require some serious skills. At the start of the Cambrian era, the air would be as thin as at the base camp of Mount Everest, but the climate was actually pretty chill and consistent back then. However, there was one teeny tiny problem: no land plants or animals to feast on. So forget about firing up the grill for a juicy steak. Instead, you'd have to come up with creative ways to catch trilobites and other funky-looking shellfish. Good luck finding a spear without any wood or a fishing net without any plant fibers. And get ready to eat them raw, unless you can figure out how to extract oil from these creatures or burn dry seaweed. But wait, if you're looking for a more comfortable existence, you gotta travel to 100 million years ago, to the Silurian period. Here, things start to get a bit easier. The air is still thin, but there's a bit more oxygen to go around. Plus, the climate is warmer and cozier. Simple land plants have finally made their debut. Not only that, but the first bony fish also show up on the scene, so you might actually find something more palatable to munch on. Just watch out for those prehistoric millipedes and spider-like creatures that share the land with you. They might not be the best dinner companions. Yeah, it all sounds fun and feasible, but let's talk a bit more about this crazy idea of instant transportation. If you magically appeared in a different time, the first thing you'd have to worry about is the amount of oxygen in the air. Now, looking at that fancy graph up there, it's pretty clear that oxygen levels used to be super low before about 0.85 billion years ago. Like, we're talking just a few % of the atmosphere. And there wasn't even any O2 in the air until this event called the Great Oxygenation happened about 2.3 billion years ago. So if you ended up back then, surviving would totally depend on how fit you are. If the oxygen concentration was less than 10%, you'd probably pass out, but not pass away. If it was just above 10%, you might be able to function, but you wouldn't exactly be living your best life. Based on oxygen alone, it seems like you could survive if you showed up around 0.75 billion years ago, give or take a few million years. Now let's talk about the cool stuff on land. The first land plants didn't show up until around 450 million years ago during the Ordovician period. Before that, there were some large algae hanging around, mostly in the range of 500 to 600 million years ago. But there wasn't a whole lot going on until those land plants came along. Other forms of life didn't start showing up on land until closer to 300 to 400 million years ago. But there was this critter, a myriapod, that lived around 428 million years ago, and it was one of the earliest land dwellers. I mean, if you lived back then, you'd have to come up with fancy recipes featuring myriapods. Not exactly mouth-watering. Don't worry if you find yourself back in time before all that land action. Around 500 to 600 million years ago, the oceans were teeming with life. There were these creatures called the Ediacaran fauna, and they were some of the first well-preserved organisms. Some of them probably hung out in the shallow areas near the shore, so you might be able to get your hands on them for a meal. But remember, there weren't any land plants yet, so you'd probably have to eat them raw and with no potatoes on the side. You'd have a sort of prehistoric sashimi on your plate. Now, around 500 million years ago, things started to get really interesting in the oceans after something called the Cambrian explosion. If you ended up in the Cambrian period, you'd have all sorts of weird animals to catch in the coastal zones. Check out the fossils from the Burgess Shale for some wild ideas. Look at these brachiopods, arthropods, and even worm-like critters. But again, no woody land plants at this point, so your meals would mostly consist of raw arthropods and algae. Alrighty, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of ice ages. It's when the Earth gets super chilly for a ridiculously long time, like millions and millions of years. This causes giant ice sheets and glaciers to spread all over the place, covering massive areas of the planet's surface. Believe it or not, our planet has experienced at least 5 major ice ages. The very first one happened about 2 billion years ago and lasted for 300 million years. The most recent ice age kicked off at around 2.6 million years ago, and we're technically still in it. So, we're in the middle of an ice age, but we're not currently living in an icy wonderland. That's because we're currently in an interglacial period. During an ice age, temperatures go through ups and downs. When it's warmer, those ice sheets and glaciers start to melt, creating what we call interglacials. And when it gets colder, they expand again, which we call glacials. So right now, we're enjoying the warm interglacial period of the most recent ice age, which kicked off around 11,000 years ago. When people mention the Ice Age, they're usually talking about the last glacial period that started around 115,000 years ago and ended roughly 11,000 years ago when our current interglacial period began. During that glacial period, things were way cooler than they are now. At its peak, when ice sheets covered most of North America, the average global temperature was about 46 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a whole 11 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than today's global average temperature. That temperature difference may not seem like much, but it was enough to turn most of North America and Eurasia into ice-covered landscapes. The Earth was also a lot drier, and sea levels were way lower because most of the water was trapped in those ice sheets. We're talking vast steppes, dry, grassy plains as far as the eye can see. And let's not forget about the savannas, warm, grassy plains, and deserts that were also part of the icy scene. During the Ice Age, there were some familiar critters roaming around, like brown bears, caribou, and wolves. But there were also some mega cool creatures that sadly went extinct when the Ice Age came to an end. We're talking mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths. Now, there are a bunch of theories floating around about why these magnificent beasts bit the dust. One idea is that us humans hunted them into extinction when we crossed paths with these megafauna. Our species, Homo sapiens, actually survived the Ice Age. We've been kicking it on this planet for around 300,000 years now, starting out in Africa and then spreading our awesomeness all over the globe. Some of our ancestors stayed put in Africa and didn't experience the full icy effects. Others ventured into different parts of the world, even braving the freezing cold of Europe's glacial environments. But we weren't the only ones out there. At the beginning of the Ice Age, there were other hominids, our closer relatives, scattered across Eurasia. We had the Neanderthals chilling in Europe, and the mysterious Denisovans hanging out in Asia. Sadly, both of these groups seems to have vanished before the Ice Age wrapped up. Now there are countless theories about how our species managed to survive the Ice Age while our hominin buddies didn't make it. Some believe it's because we're ridiculously adaptable and used our social skills, communication, and nifty tools to our advantage. And get this, humans didn't just hunker down during the Ice Age. Nope, we explored new territories and made ourselves at home. For the longest time, folks thought humans didn't set foot in North America until after the ice sheets started melting. Fossilized footprints discovered at White Sands National Park in New Mexico prove that humans have been rocking it in North America for at least 23,000 years, right around the peak of the last ice age.
The scariest legend from Norse mythology, Ragnarok, could have been inspired by true events. Yeah, that story where Thor and the other deities go down fighting and the whole world ends, only to start later again. Around the mid-6th century of the current era, two massive volcanic eruptions took place on the American continent. These eruptions sent huge amounts of gas and sulfur dioxide into the air, which made the climate much colder across the northern hemisphere, including Denmark. In old records from China during those times, they wrote the sun got dim and cold like the moon. Grain crops couldn't ripen properly, and stars were hidden for over a year because of the volcanic particles that still lingered in the sky. Scientists wanted to understand how this colder weather affected trees, so they studied the growth rings of Danish oak trees from around that time. They wanted to see how the shift in weather patterns affected tree growth during this period. The scientists compared tree samples from Denmark with ice core samples from Greenland. These ice cores hold layers of snow and ice that trap tiny bits of sulfur and other particles from past volcanic eruptions, so they can show when these eruptions occurred. The tree rings show that the trees grew less than normal in the middle of the 6th century, so the weather was much colder than usual, probably because of volcanic ash in the sky. Some farms were abandoned during that time, and nature began to reclaim these areas. All this may have caused big shifts in society, like changes in village structure and ritual practices. Archaeologists have also found many valuable objects buried during that time. It looks like people were trying to offer them to deities to bring back the sun. They feared that an endless winter before Ragnarok would start if they didn't do something. A long time before that, in what is now England, people were busy building Stonehenge. There's no debate that the larger stones were brought there by humans, but there's a new theory about the smaller so-called blue stones. They don't seem so blue on a sunny day, but they do have a bluish tinge when rain falls on them or you break them, so be careful. So the main theory is that our Neolithic ancestors worked hard to bring the stones from the Preseli Hills to Salisbury Plain. A new study suggests that long ago, during the Ice Age, glaciers might have used the Bristol Channel as a highway to move rocks. They found a large, unusual rock called a glacial erratic in Limeslade Bay. A glacial erratic is a rock or boulder moved from its original home by a glacier to a new place. The rock in Limeslade Bay is made of a type of stone called dolerite, which isn't found in the Bay Area. But it matches rocks from North Pembrokeshire, which means it likely traveled by glacier to its new location. A massive glacier from the Irish Sea must have picked up this huge rock in Pembrokeshire and carried it southeast, then east, right up the Bristol Channel. They also found other glacial erratics along the Bristol Channel, which only supports this idea. So, if the new theory is correct, it means that Neolithic people didn't carry the bluestones to Salisbury Plain, but found them already there and decided to use them to build Stonehenge. Now, if you don't like shopping lists, try thinking of them as historical documents that someone will find, say, 3,500 years from now. Archaeologists in a region of Turkey that was known for the production of pottery, metal, and glass found one shopping list that was this old on a clay tablet. It's roughly the size of a large postage stamp and was made by people who lived in Mesopotamia. They used a very old type of writing called cuneiform, which means wedge-shaped, as it was made up of marks that look like wedges. The language written on this tablet is called Akkadian, and it went extinct long ago. They used sounds to make words, just like we do today. To write these sounds, they borrowed symbols from an even older language called Sumerian. The tablet itself is a kind of shopping list left by people who were buying a large amount of furniture. They mention tables, chairs, and stools. This record helps us understand how people in the late Bronze Age kept track of goods, money, and trade. Looks like they had an organized system for buying and selling things. Meanwhile, the Bronze Age shopping list is a youngster compared to what is thought to be the oldest calendar in the world. It shows the fall and impact of a comet from around 13,000 years ago. The carving is part of the Göbekli Tepe temple complex in Turkey. Talk about alliteration. It has large round stone structures and pillars that are carved with pictures of animals and symbols. People in the Neolithic period, around 11,000 years ago, built the temple, and it might have been used for something like a giant observatory for watching the night sky. One of the most interesting objects at the complex is a tall carved vulture stone. This stone has the image of a bird and other designs on it. One scientist who studied it thought the designs might show constellations. The carvings could tell the story of a huge comet that changed the weather patterns on Earth and caused a mini ice age. There are small V-shaped marks on the pillars at Göbekli Tepe, which could be used for counting days, and other stones could show big celestial events, like meteors or comets passing by. Archaeologists in Italy, near the ancient city of Naples, were checking the ground to change the city's water pipes when they found a tomb that is about 2,000 years old. It had been well preserved, with paintings on the walls that show scenes from myths and ceilings that haven't faded. This tomb of Cerberus was named after the most famous painting you can find inside. Cerberus was a creature from Greek mythology, a huge, scary dog with 3 heads. He was known as the guard dog of the underworld. One famous myth you can see on the walls of the tomb is the story of Hercules capturing Cerberus as part of his 12 labors. As the archaeologists kept digging, they discovered images of ichthyocentaurs, creatures that were like a mix between a mermaid and a centaur. The tomb also has a large altar with vessels for liquids that they would pour out as an offering to honor the deities. The person who was buried here lies on a decorated burial bed, surrounded by paintings, symbols, and objects that people in ancient times believed would bring peace or help in the afterlife. The tomb was just found in October 2023 and is not open to visitors yet, as archaeologists are still studying it. Scientists have long wondered how heavy stone blocks were carried to the sites of the pyramids in Egypt, and they might finally have an answer. Researchers from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, believe that the ancient Egyptians built 31 pyramids along an ancient branch of the River Nile. It's now hidden under desert and farmland. It's not a new idea, but up until recently, scientists weren't sure of the location, shape, size, or proximity of the waterway the pyramid builders could have used for transportation. This time, they used radar satellite imagery, historical maps, geophysical surveys, and sediment coring to map the river branch. A major drought and sandstorms likely buried it thousands of years ago. The team managed to go below the sand surface and get images of some hidden features thanks to radar technology. They found hidden rivers and ancient structures running at the foothills of where most of the ancient Egyptian pyramids lie. Thanks to this discovery, we can now understand why they decided to build so many pyramids between Giza and Lish in what is now an inhospitable area of the Sahara Desert. Yep, there's ice all around, as far as the eye can see. A white desert covers the entrance to your cave, the one where you and a bunch of other settlers live. Everyone's gathered around a fire pit, trying to keep warm, telling each other stories about how much snow they saw the other day. Some are running around playing tag, throwing sticks, whatever people used to do for fun 300,000 years ago. You're one of the earliest Homo sapiens to ever walk the earth. Others are sleeping or just resting their eyes. All around the cave, all you can hear are stomachs rumbling. Sounds like a wild animal lurking around. You look out the mouth of the cave and see that the storm has cleared. Time to grab some tools and head out as a group. In the open wilderness, you find some berries covered in snow and plants that might be edible. But it's not enough to feed the whole tribe. It's the Ice Age, and there's not much vegetation growing anywhere. One of your friends spots some large footprints in the snow. The chase is on. You can't tell what it is, but it should be enough to feed everyone for a couple of days. As you go deeper into the snow-covered forest, you hear a growl behind you. You hope it's your stomach, but you look behind you and suddenly black out. An ice age is a period when large sheets of ice cover everything, changing the Earth permanently. It's partly responsible for the raising and lowering of sea levels, as well as the current layout of the continents. Picture monster-thick ice sheets spread across what's now Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, and even South America. That's all caused sea levels to change drastically, and temperatures around the world fell dramatically. And I'm not talking about just one ice age. There were a bunch of them. Scientists say there have been 5 major ice ages throughout history, lasting for millions of years. And we're in the middle of one right now. Relax, don't panic. It doesn't mean we're all going to be sleeping next to bonfires, trying to keep warm after being out all day looking for woolly mammoths. And no, there won't be a massive geological ice storm that freezes everything in its path. Ice ages have warmer periods in them that come and go, lasting for tens of thousands of years. In fact, billions of years ago, the Earth was one giant snowball with no life on it. And the sun back then was also just a cute little fireball without enough heat to melt all that ice. But as the sun got bigger and hotter, Earth's ice slowly melted away, leaving the green and blue ball we have today. We're living in the Quaternary Ice Age that's been going on for the past 2.6 million years, and counting. Some animals have thrived in this latest ice age, like whales and sharks. They've been at the top of the food chain for ages. Under them are seals, certain kinds of fish, otters, all the way down to tiny plankton. Up on the cold surface, mammals had to grow thick and shaggy fur just to stay warm. Ancient mammoths, rhinos, and bison were known to have thick rugs on them. They looked awesome. They were herbivores and ate small shrubs and whatever grass they could find. But several thousand years ago, temperatures began to rise, and most of these animals became extinct. The ones that remained evolved into the elephants, hippos, and rhinos we have today. You wake up from your blackout and find yourself face to face with a creature that kind of looks like a modern-day bobcat, except it's much bigger and furrier. It's a Smilodon, an epic version of a saber-toothed cat with a mean look. It's around the same size as a male lion and has 2 front fangs that make me think twice before leaving the safety of my cave. They look scary, but scientists think their bite wasn't as powerful as today's tigers or lions. What made them tough were their giant forearms used to wrestle down anyone who got on their nerves. In packs, they were even able to take down mammoths. Either way, you don't want to be waking up next to this kitty. It's staring you down, ready to pounce. But you and your friends keep calm and slowly back off. You get the genius idea to throw a rock to distract it, then run. Nowadays, it's near impossible for a human to outsprint a lion or tiger, but humans back then were much fitter. Once the danger's over, everyone continues to look for food. It's getting dark, and you haven't found anything to bring back to the cave. Suddenly, you smell something burning. Way off in the distance, you see a thin column of smoke rising into the sky. Another settlement? You and your friends look at each other and approach the smoke cautiously. Homo sapiens first came into being about 200 or 300 years ago. But human history didn't just pop up out of nowhere. As far back as 7 million years ago, some of us decided to call it quits. We left our chimpanzee ancestors in the jungle and started doing our own thing. And that didn't just happen once. Over those next millions of years, there were over 20 different human species. Some were our ancestors, some were twigs from a completely different branch. Some were tiny, others better adapted for hot or cold weather. Before you know it, you see a group of Neanderthals cooking some meat, sharpening their tools. Neanderthals were the first to migrate to Europe. Scientists believe they were around somewhere between 40,000 to 400,000 years ago. They occupied all areas between Europe and Asia, while Homo sapiens, that's us, were still all the way down in Africa. You enter their camp and immediately see the differences between each other. They're stocky and look a bit different, but there are some similarities, like flat teeth for chewing and gnawing and big skulls for their big brains. They even have clothes on, like you. According to archaeologists, they lived in shelters and made tools out of stone, sticks, and bones. They welcome you inside and give you a tour like no other. You're officially meeting another human species. They take you inside their cave and show you some of their cave paintings. They were the first artists of their time. Many of their galleries are still around today, like the ones in caves in Spain. You know their style: minimalist paintings of deer, a large handprint. They also dabbled a bit in jewelry making. They made necklaces out of eagle talons and animal fangs. They were also probably the first ones to harness the power of fire. Did they discover it when a bolt of lightning hit a tree? Or when one of them dropped a rock on another rock, creating a spark? No one really knows. But they were able to recreate it and use it to keep warm, to cook food, to see in the darkness, and to protect themselves. After the nice tour, you hang around the campfire to keep warm. They even offer you some extra clothes for the journey home, mostly thick, shaggy mammoth coats. If only you could talk to each other, that would be awesome. But it's getting dark, and you need to head back to the tribe. You say your goodbyes and thank them for teaching you how to draw a deer, and for that sack of food they gave you. The Ice Age was important for the development of the modern Homo sapiens. Because of the extreme cold and other harsh conditions, they had to adapt to survive, be extra clever and innovative. They developed advanced tools and even used bone needles to sew warm clothing. They may have hosted the first ever runway show. When the climate started to get warmer, they developed farming techniques to sustain themselves and mainly settled near large bodies of water like rivers or lakes, while others opted to be near seas and oceans. They, we, were even the first to domesticate animals. Fast forward a few 100,000 years and here we are. So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge, huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no man's land. Since there are no police stations, Immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer de lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
Meet Hulamale, also known as the City of Hope. This nickname makes total sense since this artificial island is part of the Maldives' big plan to avoid being completely submerged in the near future. Hulamale was created by placing sand from the seafloor onto a submerged coral platform, and it worked. This city sits about 6 feet above sea level, which means it's twice as high as the Maldives' capital, Male. While more and more people are moving there to live, the island was also designed to serve as a temporary evacuation site during dangerous storms and typhoons. Seychelles is another gem in the Indian Ocean that's at risk of disappearing. Unfortunately, coastal flooding is becoming a common issue there, especially during spring tides and heavy rainfall. The problem is that their main island, Mahé, hosts about 90% of the country's population. Along the coast, it's only about 6 feet above sea level. Fiji is the 3rd tropical paradise on our list, and it's also a top pick for travelers. But this nation is in a tough spot, since it's located right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where huge storms can really turn things into chaos. Take Cyclone Winston. It hit Fiji back in 2016 and ended up costing them over $1 billion in damage. So one thing they're doing to protect themselves is planting mangroves along the coast and preserving the ones that already exist. These trees are awesome since they help reduce wind speed during cyclone emergencies and also combat erosion by trapping sediments. Egypt might be in trouble too. I mean, it's not like the whole country is going to be underwater and we'll only see the tips of the pyramids in a few years. But things could really change for them as coastal cities are facing a serious risk. Take Alexandria, for instance. 45% of its population already lives below sea level. If the city is flooded, not only will everyone have to move, but Egypt in general will suffer a major impact on its fish production. In Europe, one of the most at-risk populations is in the Netherlands, where about half the people live in areas below sea level. In the future, planning a romantic gesture with tulips for your girlfriend could become an impossible mission. The Netherlands is responsible for 2/3 of the world's tulip production. So if fields are taken over by saltwater, it's game over for the blooms. But the good news is that the Dutch have centuries of experience dealing with water, so knowing how to work with storm barriers and seawalls can prevent them from a doomsday scenario. The risks of rising sea levels probably aren't higher anywhere else than here in Tuvalu. This island chain, located halfway between Australia and Hawaii, could be the first state to become uninhabitable. Its stunning land is only about 9 feet above sea level. And just by looking at it on the map, you can see how narrow it is. In fact, the narrowest part in Fongafale is only about 65 feet wide. So even before higher tides become a real problem, the country's limited farmland could be flooded with saltwater. The next country on our list is the Philippines. This archipelago in Southeast Asia boasts some of the most stunning scenery, but it faces the risk of flooding for two reasons. First, due to rising sea levels, and second, because of crazy, unpredictable weather. Since 1990, events like cyclones, earthquakes, and tsunamis have cost the country over $20 billion. Have you ever heard of Vanuatu? This chain of islands, spread out between Australia and Fiji, could be flooded soon. Vanuatu was one of the first Pacific nations to relocate an entire community to a safer spot. Back in 2005, residents living in risky coastal areas of the northern island of Tegua moved to higher ground. Next up, the Marshall Islands, a country located in the Central Pacific. Studies show that 40% of the buildings in the capital city, Majuro, could end up underwater in the future. But this country isn't throwing in the towel just yet. They've got a game plan. They are fortifying the infrastructures of their low-lying airport, relocating key buildings to higher ground, and putting up seawalls on rural islands. Heading south, we've got Nauru. This is actually one of the smallest countries in the world, covering just 8.1 square miles. Today, it's home to 10,000 people, but it's on the brink of becoming uninhabitable. Water levels are rising about 3 times faster there than the global average. The Buada Lagoon sparks special concern since it's the only surface freshwater resource, and it's located only 16 feet above sea level. Our next stop in the Pacific Ocean is the Republic of Palau. Rising sea levels are no joke for them either, but protecting their crops, especially taro, is a priority at this moment. About halfway between Hawaii and New Zealand lies Samoa, and this country is dealing with a unique situation. Not only is the volume of water increasing there, but their land is also sinking. You see, a couple of strong earthquakes and tsunamis hit Samoa back in 2009. So as the crust bounces back to its original position, the overall land surface is actually going down. Because of this, their housing and main infrastructure could take a serious hit, especially since all their airports are along the coast. Let's head to Kiribati. This Pacific nation has a big problem with frequent flooding because most of its people and infrastructure are near the coast. Apart from the volcanic island of Banaba, none of Kiribati's land is more than 6.5 feet above the ocean. To tackle this situation and keep their population safe, they had this big idea of making a massive floating platform, kind of like the ones oil companies have. But the problem is that it would cost them a fortune, as the project is estimated to be around $2 billion. If visiting Vietnam is on your bucket list, you better hurry up. The top 10 things to do there mostly involve cruising to jaw-dropping spots like down to Ha Long Bay, also known as the Descending Dragons Bay. But by 2050, the surrounding land over there might be underwater. Another huge problem Vietnam is facing is that the main rice fields are getting salty. And if you're into Vietnamese food, you know how important rice is for them. Right now, they're especially concerned about the Mekong Delta region being vulnerable. After all, this is a highly fertile area responsible for most of Vietnam's agricultural output, with over 50% of it being, rice. This nation is really putting in the effort to adjust to this new reality. They're flushing the rice fields in the Mekong Delta with fresh water to get rid of the saltiness. Our next stop is in the Caribbean Sea. Grenada is an island country, but you may know it as the Island of Spice, since its tropical climate is just perfect for cultivating things like nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. Unfortunately, Grenada and its incredible fertile soil also face an uncertain future of being submerged. Let's talk about the last country on our list, the Solomon Islands. 5 islands in this archipelago have already vanished beneath the waves, and 6 others are submerged by 20%. They include the Nusa Evili Island, which was once a hotspot to go to for a picnic in the early 2000s. Even though the situation is complicated, it's important to note that more than 300 of the islands there are inhabited. One thing about the Solomon Islands is that it seems like they're always in some kind of recovery mode, since the country often gets hit by tropical cyclones and flash floods. Their population is already working hard to save their homes from the rising seas by building stone walls along the coast, planting mangroves, and constructing houses in higher areas.
In Mongolia, dinosaurs used to live, and now there are as many horses as there are people and 10 times as many sheep there. It's the emptiest country in the world. The capital has been moved 28 times, and they even have their own Olympics. So Mongolia is located right here, on the plateau of Central Asia, right north of China. It's the 19th country in the world by land area, but it only has a bit over 3 million people. It's like the population of Los Angeles, but having a whole country to themselves. If we don't count Greenland, Mongolia is the country with the lowest population density. It has only 2 people per half a square mile. The United States has 37. Well, that is if we only count people. Mongolia has a lot of livestock, about 67 million. It's 20 times more than the number of people there. Half of that livestock is sheep. Yet of all their animals, the most prestigious one is the horse. There's a traditional saying, a Mongol without a horse is like a bird without wings, and it explains a lot. A person with many horses is considered wealthy, but don't picture huge farms with big stables filled with horses. In Mongolia, having stables is more of an exception. Horses there roam free outside all year long. It costs next to nothing to sustain a horse there because they roam outside and even find food themselves, and the country's nature provides them with enough. Winter is tough because everything is covered in snow, but horses can separate grass from snow. They get frail by spring due to a lack of food, but recover very soon after winter is over. A family can have a sacred horse in their herd. It wears a blue scarf around its neck and is almost never ridden. People there do love their horses, and this tender relationship goes centuries back. There are many songs, stories, myths, and artwork featuring horses. In the Mongolian language, there are about 500 words to describe the traits of horses, and over 200 words to describe the coat color and pattern alone. Horses have a spiritual meaning too. It's believed that they have spirits that can help the owner, and they are also believed to be a transport to heaven, so they were often sacrificed after their owner's passing. Apart from domestic animals, the country is home to some endangered species. Plus, back in the day, dinosaurs roamed the land. The first ever discovered dinosaur egg was found right there. Today, dinosaurs are, of course, extinct, except in the movies. But there are snow leopards in Mongolia, and those are also rare. If you ever do go to this country, you must be careful. Snow leopards are so quiet, you won't hear them approaching you. They make no sound as they walk. But let's get back to geography. The climate in Mongolia can be harsh and unpredictable. Within just one day, the temperature can change by 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The country doesn't have any access to large bodies of water. That's why it's very dry and doesn't get much rain. In the south of Mongolia, there is a part of one of the coldest deserts on Earth, the Gobi Desert. Only 5% of the desert is covered in sand. The rest is bare rock. It has rivers, small lakes, and grasslands, but also gold, coal, and copper. So it's not a very typical desert, but still a desert. Rain clouds don't reach there because of the Himalayan range that keeps the area in the shadow. The desert is expanding every year, because of climate change, of course, but also because of deforestation and changes in land use. The whole country is quite dry with little precipitation, and that's why the inhabitants aren't afraid of the desert. Yes, the desert is populated. There are people living there. They're nomads who are busy with raising cattle. Nomads are people who don't have a settled home. They travel with their animals from place to place following the seasons. When they settle somewhere before their next trip, they set up a tent that is called a yurt. These have been homes in Mongolia for thousands of years, and it's amazing that some people still live in them. The skeleton of a girt is made of poles, which are then covered with layers of felt and waterproof fabric. The Mongols are a very welcoming nation overall, but the nomads are on a whole other level. They don't get guests often, and they're always ready to greet someone and give them a taste of traditional horse milk. They don't even have bells at the entrance of their girts, inviting guests to walk right in. Of course, there are also people who live in cities and villages and have settled homes, and they are the majority, about 3/4 of the population. The biggest city in the country is the capital, Ulan Bator. Almost half of the country's population is concentrated there in just one city, even though it's the coldest capital city in the world. The average yearly temperature there is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The average temperature in Washington, D.C. is 60 degrees, and it's 44 in Ottawa. When the city was first founded in the 17th century, it was located about 180 miles southwest of the current place. Then it was moved a little bit 28 times until it finally settled in the current location. Why? Well, back then, most of the population were nomads, so the capital city was a mobile settlement too. Depending on seasons, pastures, water supplies, and many other factors, it moved along with its inhabitants. Now the city is big and settled, so maybe it won't be moved again. But who knows? I know, I have yet to tell you about the Mongolian Olympic Games. The event is called Naadam Festival. It's an annual festival held in the middle of summer that most Mongolians watch. In one form or another, the festival has existed for centuries. Locally, the festival is called the Three Games of Men, and people compete in 3 skills that have traditionally been considered 3 manly skills. So, what are those 3 games? It's Mongolian wrestling, horse racing, and archery. Originally, it was just men competing, but recently women have started participating in archery and horse racing. Mongolian wrestling is a folk wrestling style that's been around for thousands of years. The depictions of it can be seen on many ancient plates found in the area. Today, it's the most popular sport in the country, and Mongolia hosts many international tournaments too. So, of course, there is a wrestling part at the festival, and it's the first game. The rules are quite simple. Whoever touches the ground with anything other than a foot loses. There are no weight classes, no age or time limits, so it takes as long as it needs to win. And yet, they do it with grace. Match courtesy is important. For example, if an opponent's clothes get tangled, the other one is supposed to stop and help solve the issue, even if it means missing a good opportunity to win. At the end of the match, when one participant is defeated, the winner will give them a hand and help them back up on their feet. The game starts with either 512 or 1,024 participants who wrestle in pairs. Every loser is eliminated. The game goes on for 9 or 10 rounds, depending on the initial number of participants, until there is a winner. Then there's horse racing. This is a cross-country long-distance event, between 10 to 17 miles, depending on the age of the horse. Up to 1,000 horses from all over Mongolia can participate in the competition. Then, in archery, people compete in teams of 10. Each archer wears traditional clothes and has 4 arrows to shoot into a wall of woven or wooden cylinders. Knock one out of the wall and you get points, and the team that gets the most points wins.
The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learn to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about minus 46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's freshwater, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process. You're down in one of those polar seas where the Brinicle, eerily called the Finger of Death, is born. It's a strange, almost otherworldly place, the deep ocean, where light barely reaches. Everything down there seems to have adapted to survive in darkness and intense cold. But even those truly hardy creatures aren't ready for what a Brinicle can do. When that briny, super-cooled water starts dripping down, a ghost story begins. The formation of these Brinicles is a fascinating process, like an underwater science experiment happening in real time. We know that when seawater freezes, it doesn't freeze like freshwater. Because of all the salt in it, it has to push out impurities to form the pure ice that floats at the top. This means the salty water, or brine, ends up trapped in channels and pockets within the ice. When it sees the light of day for the first time, a Brinicle resembles a pipe of ice reaching down from the underside of a layer of sea ice. At first, a Brinicle is very fragile and its walls are thin. But the continuous flow of colder brine supports the growth of the Brinicle. It also prevents it from melting. Otherwise, this process would be inevitable, caused by the Brinicle's contact with less cold surrounding water. As the ice accumulates and the walls become thicker, the Brinicle becomes more stable. Over time, the brine trapped inside gets squeezed out through tiny cracks, dripping down in this cold, heavy plume. Once that cold brine starts flowing downward, it begins freezing the seawater around it into a sheath of ice. That's why, instead of melting as it hits the water below, it forms this icy casing that protects it, helping it grow longer and stronger. The Brinicle keeps moving forward inch by inch, and this crazy downward spiral is almost unstoppable. And when it touches down on the seafloor, that's when the trouble begins for anything living nearby. Imagine being one of those creatures on the seafloor, maybe a sea star or an unsuspecting urchin just trying to make it through the day. And all of a sudden, you see this icy tentacle nearing you. It isn't just some cold water coming down. It's basically a net of ice moving down and spreading out. There's no escape, no way to predict its coming, and no chance for survival. It's a slow-motion natural disaster in action. When a Brinicle reaches the seafloor, it continues to accumulate ice while the surrounding water freezes over. The brine keeps traveling across the seafloor in a downslope direction. Once it reaches the lowest possible point, it stops and pools. But don't let the danger distract you from how beautiful Brinicles are. Well, in their own creepy way. They look like something you'd see in a dream. Elegant, twisting ice tubes reaching down, perfectly symmetrical, and totally random. Filming a Brinicle is no easy task because they're delicate when they first form. Just the motion from a nearby current or a sudden change in temperature can snap them off, ending the show before it really starts. So, scientists who managed to capture Brinicles on film in 2011 actually got incredibly lucky. It was the first time the world got to see this icy finger descending and freezing everything it touched, and it changed our understanding of polar ecosystems. Brinicles can reach quite impressive sizes. Sometimes they can stretch for several feet. Their size depends on the conditions of the water and ice above. The slower the water movement and the colder the temperature, the bigger and stronger a Brinicle can grow. But if the water's too deep or if there's too much movement in the current, the Brinicle is likely to break apart. It needs just the right balance to survive long enough to touch down and freeze over the ocean floor. For creatures living on the seafloor, Brinicles are like invisible booby traps, only instead of avoiding a net, they're avoiding an expanding ice cage. Starfish and sea urchins might not have big brains, but they have a basic survival instinct to crawl away from danger. Sadly, with Brinicles, they're usually caught completely off guard. One second they're minding their own business, the next, an icy sheet is closing in around them, trapping them where they are and freezing them almost instantly. It's hard not to feel sympathy for these creatures, right? You watch footage of a Brinicle in action and you see a starfish just stopping. One moment it's moving slowly along the sand, and then it's frozen in place, totally helpless. It's like watching a train wreck in slow-mo. Luckily, Brinicles present danger only to smaller marine life forms like sea urchins and starfish. Bigger animals like seals or whales, or humans who happen to go diving in the ocean at the frigid poles, Brinicles are totally harmless. At the same time, for scientists, this tough natural phenomenon offers a fascinating insight into how life adapts, or fails to adapt for that matter, in extreme environments. And it gets even better. A Brinicle might just be the perfect setup for life to begin. Researchers are now looking at these super salty ice tubes as not just fatal traps, but potentially as sources of life. This theory isn't just science fiction, it's rooted in actual research. Here's how it goes. The brine channels in sea ice are full of tiny, confined spaces. Those are exactly the kind of places where chemicals can get trapped, concentrated, and start interacting in interesting ways. It's like setting up a mini-lab where the building blocks of life can come together and create something new. Scientists think this process of salt rejection in sea ice could have actually helped the first bits of life appear. Some researchers even think that this process might be happening right now on icy moons like Europa, Ganymede, or Enceladus, where there might have been frozen seas beneath thick ice layers. Just imagine it. Brinicles forming in other worlds of our solar system, laying down the foundations for extraterrestrial life. And all thanks to the same icy process that creates these fingers of death here on Earth. One way scientists describe brinicles is by comparing them to chemical gardens. Have you ever done one of those experiments where you mix metal salts into a solution and watch them produce plant-like structures? Well, you can observe a similar chemical process when a brinicle is in action. In the cold, saline-rich brine of a brinicle, certain reactions could kick off to create amino acids or other building blocks of life. It's wild to think that something so dangerous could have also helped shape our world, or could be creating other forms of life elsewhere. In both cases, whether on Earth or another planet, these icy chemical reactions might be the first step toward the formation of simple life forms. It's a kind of alchemy, where ice and salt water mix to create something more than the sum of their parts. This is one reason why scientists are so eager to study brinicles. Each one could hold a tiny clue about how life begins, survives, or fails under extreme conditions. Something as mesmerizing and weird, but at the same time simple as brinicles, hints at bigger questions. How did life start on Earth? What are the conditions needed for life to survive in extreme environments? Could icy structures like these exist in other parts of our solar system or beyond, creating similar conditions that might one day give rise to alien life? As much as they look like a silent threat reaching out from the ice, brinicles are also reminders of how beautifully complex and interconnected our world is. They may seem like simple fingers of ice, but they hold secrets that touch on everything from ecology to chemistry to the origins of life itself. So next time you hear about the ocean, remember that deep below in the darkest, coldest waters, something incredible and a little bit terrifying is happening right at this moment.
Hey, do you believe in folklore telltale signs that can help predict the weather? Actually, many of them even have a scientific backup. So let's dive in. You've probably heard this one at least once. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. Oh, you haven't? Then you might have heard a variation with the word shepherd instead of sailor. This weather lore was even commemorated by William Shakespeare, I call him Bill, back in 1593. He wrote a poem, Venus and Adonis, and there is a description of the red sky lore. Turns out Bill was right, and this one can be explained. The red sky appears when dust and small particles are trapped in the atmosphere by high pressure. When sunlight passes through the Earth's atmosphere, it splits into different colors of the spectrum and creates colorful skies. If there's a high-pressure system, it can trap dust and vapor in the atmosphere, causing blue light to scatter and leaving only red. So it can indicate that the weather will be clear and calm the next day, whereas a red sky in the morning can indicate a storm is on the way. How about another one with sailors? Rainbow in the morning gives you fair warning. Rainbow at night is a sailor's delight. Now this suggests that if you see a rainbow in the morning, it means that rain is on the way. However, if you see a rainbow at night, it means that the weather will be calm and clear the following day. And the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is still a myth. Next one. They say no weather is ill if the wind be still. This one's pretty logical too. Calm weather conditions show us that the pressure is high in this area. Highs are regions of descending air, and they prevent bad weather phenomena, such as clouds and precipitation, from forming. But there's more to that. Actually, calm conditions may be a true sign that bad weather's on the way. We often call it the calm before the storm. Have you ever seen this halo around the sun or moon? Well, it's another telltale weather sign. Next time you spot such a halo, make sure to grab an umbrella before you leave the house. This phenomenon occurs because of refraction. The sun and moon provide light, although in different ways, and this light gets refracted by ice crystals at high altitudes. When you see a halo, it means that the moisture up there is going down. Also, these halos may evolve into another beautiful phenomenon, milk sky. The milk sky is still clear, but the typical blue shade is sort of washed away and appears a bit faded or milky. Today, we can just check the weather forecast on our iPhones. But centuries ago, people needed to have some alternatives to be able to predict the weather. The very first weather forecasts appeared around 650 BCE. Back then, the Babylonians would predict weather using cloud patterns. Ooh, that's a fluffy one. Uh-oh, there's a dark one. We should go inside. People had to wait for quite a lot of centuries for mass weather forecasting. The first prototype of what we have today appeared in 1835, and it was thanks to the invention of the electric telegraph. By the way, back in the olden days, animals contributed a lot to weather forecasting. Some traditions are preserved up to today. For instance, Groundhog Day. Long story short, if the groundhog gets out of its den on the 2nd of February in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and sees its shadow, it will go back into the den, and the winter will last for 6 more weeks. On the contrary, if the groundhog does not see its shadow and doesn't get scared, spring will arrive soon this year. There's no actual scientific backup to this tradition, but surprisingly, in most cases, the groundhog predictions come true. Well, in the US, people get predictions from groundhogs. In Croatia and Serbia, people use bears to see if spring's on the way. On the 15th of February, they watch a bear awaken from winter dormancy. It's all about the shadow again. If the bear gets confused when he sees his shadow, it will go back to its den and sleep for 40 more days, thus prolonging the winter. But if it's cloudy on this day, it's a true sign that spring is coming. As to the poor schmuck who has chosen to wake the bear up, I think I'd pass on that honor. Unlike groundhogs and bears, seagulls can help predict bad weather all year round. They say, "Seagull, seagull, sit on the sand. It's never good weather when you're on the land." These birdies tend to sleep on the water, so if they sense turbulent wind, they prefer not to struggle with it but avoid it. Therefore, they just land on the beach and wait. Smart! Rain before 7, clear by 11. Pretty common, but only partly true. The occurrence of late night and early morning rains may be due to the passing of a weather front. Still, it's not 100% correct to assume that morning rain is a sign that the afternoon will be dry. In some cases, a rainstorm that develops in the late afternoon may last up until the night, causing early morning rain. Now, cows could make good weather forecast reporters too. A cow with its tail to the west makes the weather best. A cow with its tail to the east makes the weather least. Thing is, they don't really enjoy it when the wind is blowing right in their faces, so they prefer to stand with their backs to the wind. Winds blowing from the west usually bring good weather, and those blowing from the east, on the contrary, are likely to provide unsettled weather. Voila! I told you, cows are cool. So, should you ever be in a pasture with cows, you will know what weather it will be in the next few hours, even if there's no coverage and you can't use your phone. Now, in case there are no cows, bears, or any other animals that are sensitive to the weather, you can use onions. Yep, you heard that right. Even onions can predict the weather, and these guys actually predict long-term conditions. Here's a nice rhyme. Onion skins very thin, mild weather coming in. Onion skins thick and tough, coming winter cold and rough. Well, seems there's no prediction connected to French fried onion rings though. If you want to hear a scientific explanation for this, sorry, there won't be any. In fact, scientists say such rhymes have stood the test of time for one reason only, and it's our human selective memory. We tend to remember things we've predicted correctly, and if not, we just forget them. Oaks and maples can be helpful though, due to their ability to curl leaves when the humidity is very high and the wind's blowing strongly. So, when leaves turn their back, 'tis a sign it's going to rain, turns out to be quite a true saying. There's even a rhyme for it. When the leaves show their undersides, be very sure that rain betides. I know, betides, it's kind of a forced rhyme, but it is a word, it means happens. Okay, time to move on, let's not beat a dead horse, which, by the way, is not a weather predictor. So hey, did you know that you can even use your friends to predict the weather? Our human body is way more multifunctional than you could have imagined. Here's another short rhyme to prove we humans have superpowers. For instance, our body can predict rain. I know ladies by the score whose hair foretells the storm. Long before it begins to pour, their curls take a drooping form. See? I bet you've noticed it many times and maybe even correlated that our hair may act weirdly when the humidity rises. It may expand in length due to humid air, and naturally curly hair may droop. Naturally straight hair, vice versa, may even curl up a bit. If you have blonde hair, you're even more potent at rain forecasting, as it's more sensitive to humidity. On to more precise predictions. Yeah, it's cool to predict the weather, but what about predicting temperature? You can tell the temperature by counting a cricket's chirps. These guys are quite accurate thermometers. When it's warm, they chirp faster. When it's cold, their chirps get slower. Now, here's what you need to do to get the temperature. Count their chirps for 14 seconds, and then add 40 to the resulting number of chirps. Now comes the disclaimer. Crickets only work in Fahrenheit. For Celsius, you'll need to do some extra calculations. While not all weather lures are accurate all the time, they can be a fun way to predict the weather and connect with nature. Meanwhile, my hair is turning frizzy, so I'll grab an umbrella.
Are you a pro swimmer, brave enough to take a dip in any ocean or sea? Bad news. There are some places you should avoid no matter how well you swim or dive. Some of these places have dangerous underwater rocks, strong currents and tides. Others are famous for legends about monsters and mysterious creatures. So let's dive into this aquatic horror show. Have you ever heard the word the strid? It's a variation of the word the stride that is used in Yorkshire. And it refers to a narrow section of the river wharf that's so small you could jump over it. But don't be fooled by its size, it's one of the most dangerous spots around. Even taking a step into the water can have dire consequences. The river wharf has a forceful current, and since the strid is so narrow, it's even stronger in that area. The intense water flow has eroded the limestone around the strid, which created hollow spaces much deeper than the rest of the riverbed. Here's the secret. The current has also weakened the banks of the strid from below. So, the ground you're standing on, admiring the rapid flow, is probably just a fragile ledge hanging over treacherous waters. There's no record of anyone who found themselves in the water of the strid and found their way out of it. And the worst part? You wouldn't even guess that this innocent-looking stream could be such a danger. So, my advice to you, my friend, is to stick to a safer body of water for your aquatic adventures. If you're looking for a weekend getaway in California, Horseshoe Lake is the spot for you. It's got everything. Sandy beaches, hiking trails, and picnic areas, but wait, there's more to it than meets the eye. This lake has a dark side, namely around 100 acres of dead trees that surround it. And it's not just the trees that have been claimed by this lake. The earthquakes that hit in 1989 and 1990 unleashed carbon dioxide from under the hot magma. The gas seeped out into the air, damaging all the life around the lake. Even now, Horseshoe Lake is just as dangerous as it was 30 years ago. What makes it so scary is that the levels of this toxic gas change randomly. Warning signs that are posted everywhere certainly could give a horror film touch to a fun hike in the woods. In Kauai, Hawaii, there's a group of stunning waterfalls that used to be a popular destination for tourists. Kipu Falls, as they're called, were once the go-to spot for swimming and diving. To get to them, you had to take a long walk along a dirt path until you finally arrived at a breathtaking view of a 20-foot waterfall pouring into a crystal-clear pool below. But since 2011, this area has been off-limits to the public. Why, you ask? Well, there have been a lot of accidents at Kipu Falls. Obviously, jumping off the top of the waterfall would be an obvious reason for that, but in addition, there were much more mysterious cases. Witnesses tell tales of swimmers peacefully enjoying the pool at the bottom of the falls, only to be suddenly dragged under the surface. No definite explanation was found to these accidents. The locals believe that the water spirit Mo'o is to blame because it doesn't appreciate being disturbed by loud tourists. There's also a theory of a powerful whirlpool at the bottom of the pool. In any case, guide publishers do not mention Kipu Falls anymore, and trespassing is severely punished. The Samizan Hole, located in the Gulf of Thailand, is the ultimate spot for thrill-seeking divers, but it's also the most dangerous one. With a drop of 280 feet, it's the deepest diving site in the region. But its depth is not the only reason it is considered a place to avoid. The area is a major shipping zone for giant oil tankers. The strong currents around the hole make diving even more treacherous. And if that's not enough, the Samisen Hole is also home to deadly barracudas that could easily attack unsuspecting divers. The water is so murky that visibility is nearly zero, making it challenging to spot these aggressive sea creatures. All in all, the Samisen Hole is a breathtaking but extremely hazardous spot that should only be explored by experienced divers with nerves of steel. Let me tell you about New Smyrna Beach, the shark attack capital of the world. If you're looking for a relaxing vacation spot in Volusia County, Florida, you may want to reconsider this beach. The waters around New Smyrna Beach are teeming with fish, which attracts a lot of sharks. In fact, there have been so many shark attacks reported in this area that it's earned the title of the shark attack capital of the world. Even scientists have warned that if you go for a swim there, you're bound to get up close and personal with at least one of these creatures. We are talking about a distance of 10 feet, and in many cases you wouldn't even notice it. To make matters worse, the bull shark, one of the most dangerous and aggressive types of sharks, has been spotted in these waters. Once again, Kauai is on our list. The beach on Nepali coast called Hanakapiai Beach might look like heaven on earth, but don't be fooled. To get there, you have to trek through a super steep, rocky 2-mile trail. There are no lifeguards on this remote beach, so even if you decide to take a dip in the water, you're on your own. The biggest threat to your safety is the incredibly strong rip currents. They are almost always present because there are no reefs to shield the shore. And if someone gets caught in one, there's no safe place to swim to for miles. The nearest safe beach is 6 miles away. Trust me, this beach doesn't have the best track record in terms of safety, so it's highly advised that you stay out of the water if you end up at this beach. Let me tell you about a place that looks like it's straight out of a horror movie. We're talking about Berkeley Pit, which is an artificial lake situated in Butte, Montana. The first thing you'll notice about this place is that it has an eerie blood-red color that can only be described as unsettling. You might be tempted to take a dip, but that would be a grave mistake. Don't even touch it. The water is extremely dangerous due to the heavy metals present in it, such as cadmium, arsenic, zinc, lead, and copper. They come from the rocks that surround the lake and make the water super acidic. In fact, this place used to be an open-pit copper mine, hence its color. So if you want my advice, avoid this place like the plague. There are 3 lakes in Africa that maybe are the most dangerous places of all that I have mentioned so far. They're all located in Africa. Lake Monoun and Lake Nyos in Cameroon and Lake Kivu in Rwanda are all like ticking timers ready to go off. They were formed over underground pools of molten rock, and sometimes this molten rock releases toxic gases like methane and carbon dioxide right into the water. When this happens, the gases can build up until they suddenly burst out of the water, creating massive waves that can wipe out everything in their path. This type of outburst is called a limnic eruption, and it can release a cloud of poisonous gas that can be harmful to everything in the vicinity. The most terrifying part? These explosions can happen at any moment with no warning. So if you ever find yourself near one of these lakes, you'd better be on high alert, because you never know when the next accident might happen. Maybe you know other places you wouldn't recommend for a fun swim? Share your anti-recommendations in the comments below.
Well, this happened in June 2009. People in certain areas in Japan left their homes after a heavy downpour, only to find fish, frogs, and tadpoles everywhere. Fields, roads, lawns, rooftops were littered with these aquatic creatures. One man was shocked to see 13 carp on and around his truck. Apparently, he stopped to count them. No one knows for sure where the bizarre rain came from, but the most popular theory claims that a powerful waterspout picked up all these creatures. Then it carried them through the upper atmosphere and dropped the animals on the unsuspecting people below. Shelf clouds look like something from a sci-fi movie. They form when warm and moist air gets caught in a thunderstorm updraft. These ominous clouds most often mean a storm is coming. Breathtaking rainbow clouds appear on top of cotton-like puffy clouds after thunderstorms. The puffy clouds are low-altitude ones. They usually hover at a height of around 6,000 feet. When the water vapor they contain condenses, the resulting droplets act like prisms. This forms multicolored caps over the clouds. Morning glory clouds are extremely rare. They look like massive tubes stretching across the sky. They can snake for more than 600 miles, sitting relatively low. Most researchers agree that these clouds appear when an updraft squeezes through the cloud. This creates the signature rolling appearance. The cool air at the back of the cloud makes it sink downward. The best, but not the only place to see morning glory, is Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria. If you decide to travel there to see these clouds, choose a period from late September to early November. It was 2012 when the sky turned first ominous dark, then yellow. After that, blue gelatinous balls started to fall to the ground. A man from the UK found these balls outside during a hailstorm. He was walking to his garage when he spotted something unusually bright among the whitish hailstones. When researchers examined this jelly rain, they found out the balls were made from the substance used in diapers or potting soil. It's used to absorb liquid. It's still unclear whether the balls fell from the sky, or maybe the melting ice made a few already existing crystals expand in the blink of an eye. Huge white lumps over your head are called mammatus clouds. They can make you believe the sky is falling. Most clouds form when the air rises into the atmosphere, but not mammatus ones. They appear when moist and cool air goes down and mixes with dry air. The result? Unique puffed rice clouds. By the way, if you spot this phenomenon, bad weather is just around the corner. Whoa, mama! Colorful nacreous clouds occur extremely high in the atmosphere. I mean, twice as high as a commercial airplane's cruising altitude. The air at such heights is extremely dry and cold. Ice crystals in nacreous clouds are much smaller than those that form more common clouds. They scatter light in a different way. And this gives the clouds their mother-of-pearl appearance. Blood rain looks more terrifying than any horror movie. But in reality, there's nothing strange or unnatural about this weather phenomenon. People have known about such scarlet-tinted rains since the time of ancient Rome. Sometimes powerful winds lift red dust into the atmosphere and carry it far, far away, to another galaxy. In the end, this dust gets mixed with clouds, which colors the rain. By the way, dust from coal mines can make the rain black. Pollen is responsible for yellow rains, and some other kinds of dust can turn the rainwater white. In Australia, it sometimes rains spiders. That's because these creatures can balloon. That's a highly unusual way of traveling. A spider climbs to the very top of a tall tree or shrub, and then it spins several strands of silk. These strands help the spider to be carried away by the wind. It's not easy to spot ballooning, but sometimes, if the weather is especially damp and unpleasant, mass ballooning happens, and then you can't help but pay attention. Millions of spiders set off on a journey to find another place with better conditions. It may seem like it's snowing outside, but no, those are spiders drifting down to the ground. Ever see huge round disks in the sky? Most likely, those were lenticular clouds. They usually form over large and high places, like mountains or hills. When strong winds bump into some barrier, this creates an air wave. The air kind of wraps around the obstacle, and the higher the barrier is, the colder the air that's rising over it becomes. At some point, the moisture it contains turns into water droplets, and they form the unusual clouds. Lenticular clouds can look like waves, a pizza, or even a stack of pancakes. How yummy! Volcanic tornadoes are possibly one of the most terrifying natural phenomena. When a volcano erupts, it spews red-hot rock and ash high into the air. As for solid lava pieces and hot gases, they travel down the volcano slope. When this flow moves down, some of the trapped gases begin to rise and spin at the same time. They get squeezed by the surrounding air, which makes them spin faster and faster. That's how a volcanic tornado gets born. Luckily, this phenomenon has a very short lifespan. On March 19, 2018, the inhabitants of Alabama had to run for their lives. Otherwise, they would have been hit by huge chunks of ice falling from the sky. It was the infamous hailstorm that caused millions of dollars worth of damage. After the hailstorm, the area looked gloomy. Broken shop windows, smashed car windshields, busted billboards, holes in the roofs. At least, researchers got excited when they found a hailstone near the town of Cullman. This softball-sized monster was more than 5 inches across. No wonder it set a new state record. Cylindrical snow donuts occur when a wind gust decides to make a snowball. It starts to roll some snow across a snowy area. If it were a real snowball, it would eventually become too heavy for the wind to move. But the snow donut's center is hollowed out. This happens because its inner layer is too thin and is blown away when the donut is formed. This makes it lighter than a snowball, and that's why it also rolls farther. Unfortunately, you just can't go and find snow donuts. They're rare because they need very precise conditions to appear. Moonbows are a much rarer phenomenon than rainbows. They're caused by moonlight rather than direct sunlight and occur only when the moon is near full. Moonbows are dim and often seem to be white, but it's just an illusion. The human eye is just not sensitive enough to catch all the colors. Lightning balls are small, floating spheres of light. They can be orange, yellow, or even red. Sometimes lightning balls descend from the sky. In other cases, they appear out of nowhere, hovering several feet above the ground. They don't emit any heat or produce very little sound. Lightning balls can bounce off objects. If they come across something electrical, like a TV, they usually disappear with a quiet pop, leaving behind the smell of sulfur. But lightning balls can also start fires or explode. Scientists believe lightning balls might be connected with thunderstorms, but there's no solid proof yet. Fog bows are almost white, pale blue on the inside, and faint red on the outside. You have higher chances of seeing a fog bow over the cold sea or ocean when warm air comes into contact with much colder air. This phenomenon also occurs when the sun is bright and the fog is thin enough for the light to get through. Pele's hair is thin lava threads. They look golden and pretty, but don't even think about picking them up. Yeah, they can harm you. The wind sometimes catches small droplets of lava coming from active volcanoes. These droplets get carried miles away from the vent. They get stretched into super-thin glass wires, also called hair lava. Some strands can be as long as 6 feet. In March 2018, those who looked up in the sky in northern Nevada saw one of the rarest and most bizarre clouds ever. It was a horseshoe cloud. Such a vortex happens when a flat cloud travels over a column of warm, rising air. This air not only gives the cloud its impressive shape, but also adds some spin to its movement. But you've got to be quick. Horseshoe clouds are very fleeting and usually last for only several minutes. Frost flowers bloom on young sea ice in the Arctic Ocean or on thin lake ice. They're fragile and delicate ice crystals. These structures grow during temperature changes. They draw moisture from the ice surface and rise, capturing bacteria and salt. You can find frost flowers in Antarctica too, but wherever these crystals grow, people know disappointingly very little about them. Still, they're awfully pretty. Ah, Kiev, you've been dreaming of getting here for years. Getting out your trusty camera, you start taking pictures of the cathedrals, aviation museum, and the Dnipro River, when, without warning, there's an enormous boom behind you. Turning around, you see something towering in the distance. It looks like a gigantic explosion. Uh-oh, time to leave fast. In June 2020, what the people of Kiev were looking at was an anvil cloud, a rare storm formation in the sky. Forming when strong air currents carry water vapor upwards. The air expands and spreads out as it hits the bottom of the stratosphere. It pushes the dense cloud into the cool anvil shape you see, and sometimes it even gets to be a mushroom. Anvil clouds produce some of the most dangerous lightning of all storms, one that's called a bolt out of the blue. This lightning strike seems to magically come out of the blue sky with the storm being many miles away. This type of bolt comes from the top of the anvil and can be 10 times more powerful than a typical lightning strike. People got so frightened after witnessing a giant cloud just 60 miles away, thinking something terrible must have happened. The locals had pictures of the large billow on social media before officials could explain what was going on. Authorities managed to calm everyone's fears by informing them it was nothing more than a natural phenomenon, and a beautiful one at that. Before dissipating, these clouds typically stay in one area, regardless of how strong the wind is. Touring around the northern tip of Queensland, Australia, way away from those creepy crawlies, it's time to take a break and relax at the beach. Getting comfortable, you notice a great big shadow passes over you, then another, and yet another. Looking up, this weird weather is simply stunning. The clouds are called morning glory, a very rare type of cloud that almost seems to roll across the sky, looking like a massive tube. These clouds can measure up to 600 miles long, even appearing in large groups as well. This phenomenon is the result of an updraft pushing through the cloud, creating a rolling appearance, while moist cooler air at the back causes them to sink downward. Southern India, between July and September 2001, people witnessed one of the strangest weather phenomenon in recorded history. The rain was red. What many would have thought to be a typical rainstorm left them shocked. The color was bright enough to stain clothes. There were other colors too, such as green, yellow, brown, and even black. In the middle of a monsoon, red rain started to fall, and did so periodically for several weeks. Researchers have found this unusual rain is stained either by dust or algae, so don't try to catch any on your tongue. Scientists aren't entirely sure how the algae got all the way up there. This does make events like this a little unsettling. Like to take a bubble bath to relax after an exhausting day, but taking too long to fill the bathtub? Problem solved. Head to any coastline after a big storm and take a dip. Foamy tides aren't native to any one place or location. They can be formed anywhere in the world. They're most likely to happen along rocky coastlines, like the coast of San Francisco, Northern Ireland, or the Mooloolaba, Australia. Each coast has differing conditions forming the sea foams. If you scoop up seawater into a glass and look at it closely, you'll see it's full of tiny particles. Many things like plants, chemicals, and lots of salt and minerals create the perfect formula for foam. When powerful currents and wind mix it all together, we get something that resembles a cappuccino top floating on top of the water. When freezing temperatures hit orchards in Michigan, all kinds of unusual things happen, like ghost apples. No, they're not going to scare you at all. But if you plan on sneaking away one winter to find one, be warned. Everything has to be perfect for this to occur, and it's going to be freezing cold. This is actually a rare weather phenomenon caused by having the apples freeze where they are, with rain coating the fruit in a thin layer of ice. The apples then thaw and leak out like applesauce, leaving just the beautiful ice shell behind. The Catatumbo River in Venezuela might be the most electric place in the world, with nearly 300 storm days per year. The lightning storms are so consistent, they're predicted for 3 months in advance. During the wet season in October, you might see 30 lightning flashes in a single minute, a truly shocking experience. With each bolt having the energy to power a single light bulb for 6 months, the impressive display could power all of Venezuela forever. At sunset, strong winds flow around the 3 surrounding mountains, forming storm clouds over the water. As the water droplets of humid air collide with ice crystals from the cold air, it produces the static charges that cause the lightning storms nearly every night. If that wasn't bad enough, some storms have lightning above them as well. Try to take a picture of this one. Jellyfish lightning sprites are electrical discharges high in Earth's atmosphere. They're associated with powerful thunderstorms, but they have nothing to do with rain. These sprites occur 30 to 50 miles up in the sky, in the mesosphere. Artificial lights at night make it a lot harder to see this faint lightning. If you spot one, it'll look tiny, but can be well over 30 miles wide. The red sprites are a type of cold plasma discharge above a thundercloud. They're the balance of the lightning charges between the storm clouds and the ground below. Don't try to find this type of donut at your favorite bakery. It won't be there. Snow donuts are one of the rarest meteorological sights to see, with perfect weather conditions needed just to create them. Found in any snow-covered mountain area, like the Rocky Mountains, the wind, temperature, snow, ice, and moisture have to all work together for us to see these phenomenal rings. A thin layer of wet snow on the ground. Under that layer, ice or powdered snow. Then, a strong enough breeze to roll the donut down a hill, just like a snowball. Once it stops rolling, it can be the size of a baseball or as large as a car tire. It all depends on how strong the wind is. A newly formed snow donut won't stay around for very long, so hurry up with that camera. Watching the sunset over the horizon, the beautiful purples and pink overhead are nothing compared to the 3 suns you see in front of you. Wow, since when did Earth get 3 suns? These phantom stars sometimes appearing beside the sun are called sundogs. Maybe they're called that because they're kind of dogging the actual sun? Sundogs often appear as colored areas of light at the same height above the horizon as the sun. They're mostly observed on a ring or halo, where ice crystals best reflect the light. There are also moondogs that appear alongside the moon and are formed by lunar light passing through ice crystals, though these aren't seen nearly as much as their daytime partners. Taking photos in the wild, you finally found the perfect spot to take that dream shot. The crystal clear water, the pines, the mountains, and the flying saucer. Wait, a flying saucer? Oh, aliens are here! You might be thinking this if you saw a saucer-shaped cloud. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their name though. Put that on the screen, please. Wait, just kidding. It's Altocumulus lenticularis. Aren't you impressed? These are really just unusual cloud formations over mountaintops. When moist air flows over a mountain, a wave is created if the temperature difference is perfect. As the air passes through the wave, evaporation occurs and a series of these clouds may form into an oval shape. Not aliens at all. Whew! The sky is falling! The sky is falling! Well, people who have experienced these clouds say they look like they're coming down from the sky. Mammatus clouds look like giant white lumpy marshmallows, but it might be hard to toast these ones. These weird fluffy clouds can extend hundreds of miles in any direction, remaining visible for short periods at the bottom of anvil or other thunderstorm clouds. The strange bubble shapes are formed from turbulence within the storm itself, creating an uneven cloud base and appearing anywhere in the world. Mammatus clouds form when moist air sinks into dry air. The air must be cooler than its surroundings, cooled with ice, or be heavy with water. You're in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, one of the driest places on Earth. But this desert has a beautiful secret. Every 3 to 5 years, flowers pop up out of nowhere. It's so famous, it's also called the flowering desert. Seeds lie around in the ground just waiting for some rain. When the desert gets enough water, about 200 types of flowers sprout up. The yellow sands of the Atacama turn purple, white, green, and even pink. Another mystical phenomenon that can be seen in the desert is called a sand waterfall. When the wind brings a lot of sand to the edge of the canyon, it begins to fall down. Now amplify this effect 100 times and you get a sand waterfall in Saudi Arabia. It really is like Niagara Falls, only there's not a drop of water. The locals say this phenomenon warns of an impending sandstorm. Fairy rings, also known as elf rings or pixie rings, are mysterious circles of mushrooms that appear in grasslands and forested areas. There's a lot of debate about why these fairy rings form a nearly perfect circle. Some superstitions claim that fairy dances would burn the ground, causing mushrooms to rapidly grow. In southern India, between July and September 2001, people witnessed one of the strangest weather phenomena in recorded history. The rain was red. What many would have thought to be a typical rainstorm left them shocked. The color was bright enough to stain clothes. There were other colors too, such as green, yellow, brown, and even black. In the middle of a monsoon, red rain started to fall, and so did periodically for several weeks. Researchers have found this unusual rain is stained either by dust or algae, so don't try to catch any on your tongue. Scientists aren't entirely sure how the algae got all the way up there. This does make events like this a little unsettling. Now, people who live in rural central Norway over the Hessdalen Valley can often witness floating lights of white, yellow, and red cross the sky. The lights appear both at day and night, and once back in the 80s, the 1980s, they were spotted 15 to 20 times in a single week. The Hessdalen lights can last just a few seconds, but sometimes they can last more than an hour. The lights move, seeming to float or even sway around. Some scientists believe that the reason for these lights is due to ionized iron dust. Others say it's a combination that includes sodium, oxygen, and hydrogen. Many people claim they're just misidentified aircrafts. Norway! Snow donuts are one of the rarest meteorological sights to see, with perfect weather conditions needed just to create them. Found in any snow-covered mountain area, like the Rocky Mountains, the wind, temperature, snow, ice, and moisture all have to work together for us to see these phenomenal rings. A thin layer of wet snow on the ground. Under that layer, ice or powdered snow. Then, a strong enough breeze to roll the donut down a hill, just like a snowball. Once it stops rolling, it can be the size of a baseball or as large as a car tire. It all depends on how strong the wind is. A newly formed snow donut won't stay around for very long, so hurry up with that camera and watch your head. Can you believe there's another place on Earth with its own ecosystem and atmosphere, similar to another planet? Well, start believing. Movil Cave, located in southeastern Romania, remained closed in complete darkness for a whopping 5.5 million years. It wasn't until workers discovered the cave, when they were looking for a place to build, that anyone learned about it. Scientists carved out an opening to the cave and found that a completely sustained ecosystem was thriving inside. As a pathway was carved through the rock past numerous tunnels, scientists found a lake of sulfuric water that stank like rotten eggs. The air was filled with hydrogen sulfide and had 100 times more carbon dioxide than Earth's atmosphere contains. Needless to say, this air is completely toxic. What's even crazier is that a whole ecosystem has been existing in this cave, with 33 species that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. This cave gives us a glimpse of what could possibly exist on other planets with completely different atmospheres. How it managed to exist on Earth all this time without anyone knowing is rather unbelievable, isn't it? Now, check these trees out. They're called Indian rubber trees. Their strong roots grow not underground, but on the surface. With the help of special frames and fasteners, people have learned to control how these roots grow. Let's say a tree is next to a small pit. You need to make a bridge from one end of this pit to the other. You direct the growing tree roots in the needed direction. Over time, the roots penetrate the ground and strengthen under endless downpours. It takes about 15 years to create one bridge. Here's another amazing tree called the Tree of Life. It grows in Bahrain's desert. The tree has been standing on top of this sandy hill for more than 400 years, surrounded by miles of sand. It's extremely hot here and there's no moisture. But despite this, the tree has green leaves and it continues to grow. So far, scientists haven't figured out yet how the tree gets moisture and nutrients. There are only places with oil deposits around. Locals think the tree is sacred. After all, it demonstrates the magic of life and the power of nature. Some experts are sure it's all about the roots. They go so deep that they can reach underground sources of water. So, there you are. You've been driving for hours through the night. You didn't have any chance to sleep, so your mind is hanging by a thread. You stop the car and go out to stretch your limbs. And then you look up into the sky and see a beautiful sunrise. Whoa, wait. There are 3 suns in the sky. You rub your eyes, but nope, there's still 3 bright stars in the sky. No, our home star hasn't been torn into 3 pieces, nor has it been visited by 2 other stars. This is called a sundog. It occurs mostly during severe frosts. Small ice crystals in the sky bend the light. As a result, you may see 3 bright spots in the sky instead of just 1. This phenomenon is officially called a halo. Usually it's just a circle around the sun. You can even see a halo at night, too. Just look at a street lamp and you'll see a bright circle around it. Sometimes, a halo can take on a fancier shape. If there's a lot of ice in the air, the light is warped even more. Just like in a room with a dozen mirrors. Then, the halo can take on the shape of a human eye. Because of this phenomenon, a false dawn can also occur. While you're looking at the horizon, the dawn begins and the edge of the sun appears. A little bit more and, wait, the sun starts to just dissolve in the sky. After a few moments, it's dark again. And only a minute later, the real sun shows its face. It was the same light curvature effect you saw before with the 3 suns. Only now, the light is curved vertically, not horizontally. And instead of the real sun, its reflection in ice crystals in the sky appeared. But the sunrise with 3 stars on the horizon is actually real. Not on Earth, though, but 340 light-years away. There's a star system at the center of which lurks a star almost twice the size of the Sun. And there are 2 smaller stars orbiting around this giant. This strange world has a planet, too. Sunsets and dawns there really happen with 3 stars. If you brought your significant other to a park bench to watch a sunset here, your date would go just fine, whatever that means. And since we're talking about the most baffling natural phenomena, it would be a crime not to mention snow in a desert. Yep, in the winter of 2018, the inhabitants of the Sahara Desert, one of the driest and hottest places on this planet, woke up to discover a thick blanket of snow covering the sand. In some places, the layer of snow enveloping the dunes reached a staggering 15 inches. Meteorologists, however, had an explanation for this exciting phenomenon. They stated that cold pools of air, combined with the precipitation from the most recent storm, resulted in a snowfall instead of rain. So, what do you do in that case? Build snow camels? 1 hump or 2.
In December 2014, an entire district in Budapest got covered with ice crystals. The trees in the area couldn't handle the pressure from the ice and they started toppling over. It was a spooky occurrence called ice fog. When it happens, the temperature drops significantly, freezing everything around, like Dementors did in the Harry Potter movies. All thanks to a temperature flip-flop. It not only messes with what you can see, but also creates ghostly pillars and halos that glow in the dark. Ice fog is made up of tiny ice crystals. When it's below 14 degrees Fahrenheit, water droplets in the air freeze and turn into ice crystals. Until then, they stay liquid unless they find something to freeze onto. Ice fog usually forms in chilly parts of the world, like the Arctic or Antarctic. Budapest was a plot twist. Hot, moist gases from vehicles and planes can also create ice fog. One plane takes off on a cold day and boom! There's so much ice fog that the next plane can't see a thing. That sometimes happens. It's not the same as diamond dust, which is when sparse ice crystals fall from a clear sky. It forms when the humidity is super high, nearly 100%, and the air temperature drops way below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. This creates ice crystals in the air, and they end up settling on different surfaces. Interestingly, early settlers thought these ice crystals could get into their lungs and cause some trouble. There are many other interesting ice formations, such as rabbit ice. It occurs when the air is chilly but the ground is yet to embrace the frosty vibes. The sap inside plant stems expands as it freezes, making the stems crack open. Once it happens, liquid slips out, meets the frosty air, and turns into thin layers of ice, creating beautiful petal or ribbon-like formations. Earthquake lights are another weird and unique phenomenon. When a powerful magnitude 8.1 earthquake hit Mexico in 2017, images of strange green and blue lights in the sky flooded social media. These so-called Mexico earthquake lights added another layer of mystery. Similar to ball lightning, earthquake lights are pretty rare. Fascinating, but tough for scientists to figure out. What makes it tricky is that the instances of luminosity around earthquakes don't all look the same. There are both theories and myths about this thing. The lights can appear in many different shapes, forms, and colors. Digging into history, researchers examined 65 accounts of these lights dating back to 1600 CE. For instance, on November 12, 1988, people reported a bright purple-pink globe of light along the St. Lawrence River in Quebec, just 11 days before a powerful quake. In Pisco, Peru, the lights took the form of bright flashes captured on security cameras before an 8.0 magnitude earthquake in 2007. And before a 2009 earthquake in L'Aquila, Italy, folks saw 4-inch flames of light flickering above a stone street. Yet, there are still debates about whether earthquake lights are real or not. The U.S. Geological Survey is a bit cautious, not sure whether individual reports of unusual lighting around the time and place of an earthquake truly represent earthquake lights. In one study, scientists theorized that these lights were caused by electric charges activated in specific types of rocks during seismic activity, like turning on a battery in Earth's crust. Some rocks, such as basalt and gabbro, have tiny crystal defects. They might release electrical charges into the air. Researchers estimated that the conditions needed for the creation of these lights existed in less than 0.5% of earthquakes worldwide. It could explain their rarity. They also noted that the lights tend to show up more often before or during quakes than afterward. An earlier study suggested that tectonic stress could create a piezoelectric effect where quartz-bearing rocks produce strong electric fields when compressed. Yet, studying earthquake lights is tough because they're unpredictable and short-lived. Time to talk about a sudden ring around the moon or sun. You're walking with a friend and suddenly see this sun halo. It's nature's warning. A snow or rainstorm is coming. These halos form when bazillions of tiny ice crystals in clouds refract sunlight. Resist the temptation to stare at this wonder directly. It can damage your eyes. Grab sunglasses and then admire it for about 40 minutes. Nature sends other early warnings too. If the sea mysteriously recedes, showing coral and fish, a tsunami might be on the way. Watch out for rip currents on the beach. Sharks might be fleeing a storm if they come unusually close. Feeling your hair stand on end and jewelry buzzing? Lightning might strike nearby. Seek shelter. Avalanches, green storms, and lakes near volcanoes are all potential dangers. Cross seas are extremely dangerous. Cave exploration during a full moon might cost you your life. If the ocean turns reddish-brown, avoid swimming. There might be toxic algae in the water. Animals sense disasters too. If they act strangely, pay attention. There's a fascinating blue glow around Matsu Islands on summer nights. It's caused by tiny glowing creatures. Tourists love watching this beautiful spectacle, but there's a downside. It's toxic and getting bigger each year, as revealed by a study. Despite its romantic appearance, this phenomenon is harmful. A team of oceanographers used satellite data to track its growth over 19 years. After analyzing almost 1,000 satellite images, they concluded that it was expanding into deeper waters. Unfortunately, this expansion poses a threat to marine life. The bloom of blue tears can poison fish and sea turtles and even affect human health. While dinoflagellates themselves aren't toxic, their food, toxic algae, releases harmful chemicals into the water. This process depletes oxygen, endangering marine animals. The main cause is unclear, but pollution from agriculture down the Yangtze River seems to play a crucial role. Agricultural runoff introduces nutrients that fuel the bloom. During the construction of the Three Gorges Dam project, the bloom's size reduced when the river's flow decreased. After the dam was finished and the river started flowing strongly again, the bloom resumed its growth. The team predicts that blue tears will keep expanding, posing an ongoing threat to marine life and creating more vividly glowing waters. A catabatic wind or drainage wind happens when dense cold air descends from a higher elevation down a slope due to gravity. These winds can be powerful, sometimes reaching hurricane speeds, but rarely. Unlike all downslope winds, catabatic winds like the Bora in the Adriatic or Santa Ana in California originate from cooling air on elevated surfaces like plateaus or mountains. As the air descends, it warms up. Its temperature depends on the source region. In Antarctica, catabatic winds are crucial in shaping wind fields. In regions such as Greenland and Antarctica, these winds can become extremely intense, reaching hurricane force. They contribute to unique phenomena, such as the McMurdo dry valleys in Antarctica, and are associated with such dangers as willowaws in the Fuegian Archipelago and Alaska. St. Elmo's fire is a natural phenomenon worth mentioning. It happens during thunderstorms or volcanic eruptions when there's a strong electric field around the area. It creates a bluish or violet glow around such things as ship masts, airplane edges, or sharp objects. This glow is caused by ionized air molecules and is more noticeable in low light conditions. The glow is a form of plasma, and it happens when the electric field around an object causes the ionization of air molecules. This can occur during thunderstorms because there are high voltage differences between clouds and the ground. Sharp points make it easier for St. Elmo's fire to occur because the electric field is more concentrated in those areas. The colors you see, blue or violet, come from the fluorescence of nitrogen and oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. Similar to how neon lights work, but with different gases. From ancient Greece to 15th century China, this phenomenon has been seen throughout history.
In the high altitudes of northern China, there is one mountain that remains frozen all year round. It's a naturally occurring spot of cold earth. A thick layer of permafrost lies underneath the mountain's top layer of soil, freezing everything above it. The climate-defying pocket of frozen land covers over 26 feet of a mountain slope in Pingchuyen County, a place famous for its scorching hot summers, reaching highs of 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This frozen spot of land manages to survive the blazing temperatures due to the coarse blocky layer of soil covering the permafrost. This coarse soil prevents the hot climate from reaching and melting the permafrost, allowing the ground to stay frozen all year round. Argentina may be famous for its beautiful beaches and hot sun, but in southern Argentina, you can find Perito Moreno Glacier. This stunning blue glacier covers over 100 square miles and is constantly growing. When visiting this natural wonder, you might notice an archway of ice forming off the side of the glacier, reaching out to the nearby land. Suddenly, the archway ruptures and the ice collapses into the water below. This is completely natural. The glacier goes through a process of forming these arches until they collapse. It'll form another one in no time. On California's Glass Beach, there's no sand and only colorful gemstone-like pebbles called sea glass. Surprisingly, these beautiful pebbles are the result of garbage. For decades, the beach was used as a massive dumping ground for locals to abandon their glass, appliances, and even cars on the beachfront. The state eventually prohibited anyone from disposing of their garbage on the beach. Over the years, the waves broke down all the remaining junk and turned it into brightly colored pebbles that attract tourists from all over. The highest waterfall in the world, Angel Falls, can be found in southern Venezuela. The water there travels along one of the biggest tabletop mountains in Venezuela and plummets 2,500 feet down into the jungle below. That's 3 times taller than the Eiffel Tower. The water falls from so high that most of it evaporates into mist before even reaching the ground. Visitors can feel the mist settling on their skin from over half a mile away. In Scotland, hidden away from the main roads and tucked deep within the woodlands, is Fiddick Glen. This area looks like something out of an ancient fairy tale, with looming glass moss-covered rock formations and crimson red waters. The water's red color is due to the red sandstone lying beneath the shallow river. To get to this stunning natural beauty, you have to embark on a dangerous hike down steep, muddy hills, clambering onto trees to stop you from falling. But when you reach the bottom, it'll all have been worth it to watch the sunlight shine off the ruby waters and see the towering rocks of this enchanting world. With bubblegum pink water and a surrounding circle of emerald green forests, it's hard to believe that Lake Hillier is a real place. Located in Western Australia, no one can truly explain why the lake has pink color. However, scientists have theorized that the high quantities of salt in the lake have attracted a salt-loving pink bacteria called halobacteria, responsible for the lake's trademark shade. In a small peninsula in South America, there is one of the most beautiful natural wonders in the world, the marble caves. These look like any other caves from the outside. Inside these caves, the walls consist of smooth, swirling blue marble formations. Over thousands of years, water has eroded the marble deposits within these caves, forming this unique cave system. So while deep blue color seems like it's part of the marble, it's the reflection of the water that causes these blue shades along the cave walls. Azerbaijan's mud volcanoes are exactly what they sound like. Over 300 of these natural phenomena are located in Azerbaijan, more than anywhere else in the world. There have been over 200 eruptions since records began. Mud volcanoes are landforms caused by the eruption of mud, water, and gases. Pockets of gas form underground and force their way to the surface, eventually erupting and splattering mud everywhere. These volcanoes can be pretty dangerous. In 2006, a mud volcano erupted in Indonesia and coated an entire nearby village in thick mud. Pamukkale is a marvelous hillside of tiered thermal pools. The name of the Turkish city translates to Cotton Castle. The pools are made of travertine, a type of limestone that gives the hillside its stunning white color. In addition, the stone has geothermal properties, making the pools hot springs. There are 17 pools in total, and all are open to the public 7 days a week. The temperatures range from 95 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. They are essentially nature's version of a hot tub. Legend has it that the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland was formed when a great Irish giant was challenged to battle a Scottish giant. The causeway was built across the sea so the two giants could meet. When the Irish giant defeated his foe, the Scottish giant ran home and destroyed the causeway behind him. All that remains are the beginnings of the causeway at the water's edge. The stunning rock formation of interlocking columns was the result of an ancient volcanic eruption. The columns are a hexagonal shape and form a natural staircase from the Irish Sea to a foot of a cliff. The tallest columns are 39 feet high. The Giant's Causeway is the most popular tourist destination in Northern Ireland, receiving almost 1 million visitors in 2019. Deep within the Nika mines in Mexico, you can find the Cave of Crystals. The cave is full of massive shards of bright selenite crystals. The largest is 37 feet tall. These are some of the largest natural crystals in the world. It's thought that the water that previously filled the cave was incredibly rich in minerals, allowing the crystals to grow to their full potential. Unfortunately, tourists cannot visit the Cave of Crystals due to its scorching temperature and humid conditions. Even scientists are required to have a special permit to enter the cave. The River of Five Colors is located in the Colombian province of Meta. Known locally as the Rainbow River, the waters are famous for their striking colors. The river is variously colored yellow, green, blue, black, and most prominently red from summer till winter. Due to a lack of nutrients, the river's water is naturally clear, so it's easy to see diverse and colorful plant life on the riverbed. It's these vibrant plants that give the waters its many colors. In New Zealand, you can take a boat ride through the beautiful Waitomo Caves. The walls of the caves glow luminescent, like bright stars against the night sky. But these glowing lights aren't stars, they're worms. Luminescent glowworms live in the walls of the cave, giving the cave its trademark glow. The particular species of glowworms cannot be found anywhere else in the world. For thousands of years, the fairy chimneys have stood tall in Cappadocia, Turkey. These unusual rock formations are tall, thin spires of rock that were initially formed by lava. The tallest chimney is 130 feet high. Humans have hollowed out the insides of these rocks for hundreds of years to create homes for themselves. Today you can visit one of the many hotels that currently exist inside the fairy chimneys. Wave Rock is a popular spot for a photo shoot in Western Australia. The giant rock is 46 feet tall and shaped like a breaking ocean wave. Millions of years of strong winds and hard rainfall eroded the rock into the wave-like shape it has today. The rock has a stunning mix of red and gray colors caused by minerals washed down the rock. The site of the Wave Rock has become a famous camping ground due to its proximity to beautiful lakes and a variety of wildlife. The Zanyi National Geopark in China has previously been voted one of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. The park is famous for its colorful rock formations, popularly known as the Rainbow Mountains. Layers of minerals and different colored sandstone were slowly pushed together across 24 million years to create the stunning landscape.
You're hiking in the wilderness, looking for a safe spot to set up camp. All you can hear are leaves and branches crackling under your footsteps. Some squirrels are running up a tree over there, but suddenly, something unexpected happens. You notice something weird in the distance in between the trees. It kind of looks like a concrete structure of some kind. Weird. At this point, you're at least 20 miles deep into the woods, and there are no nearby towns or villages, as far as you know. So you decide to go off the trail with your friends to get a closer look. But as you get nearer, you realize that it's leading to nowhere. What's it doing here in the middle of literally nowhere? And it doesn't even lead to anything. You put on your Sherlock Holmes cap and investigate. So, maybe there used to be an old house or mansion here that collapsed over the years, and the only thing left is a staircase? But, weirdly enough, after circling the bizarre structure, you realize there's no trace of any ruins or even foundations. It's like someone just sliced a staircase off their house, cake style, and plopped it here for no reason. Okay? You and your friends aren't really into getting a whole lot closer. Something feels wrong. The longer you look at this weird structure, the more you feel a super creepy presence. Something tells you you should probably leave the area as fast as possible. As weird as this sounds, discoveries of random staircases, illogically found in the woods, are surprisingly common. Some are made of wood, others of brick or stone. Some look ancient, while others look like they were finished yesterday. The one thing they all have in common, they all lead to absolutely nowhere, and they're all found in super mysterious locations. One of the most famous ones is in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. A long, medieval-looking staircase made of stones with Roman arches in the middle of the woods. It's believed to have been part of Madame Antoinette Sherry's castle. She was a big singer back in Paris. The castle dates back about 100 years, and it was later discovered again in 1962. This time, there was nothing but a staircase. Another mysterious ancient staircase dates back to 9,000 years ago. It's in a forest in Italy. It looks like a series of stairs that lead to a tiny platform at the top. Now, why go through all the trouble of building the thing if it leads to nowhere? Well, some scientists think it could have been some sort of ritual tower, but your guess is as good as theirs. There's an anomaly in the Indian Ocean known as the Indian Ocean Geoid Low, or IOGL. It produces the largest distorting natural gravitational force in the world. Heavy mineral deposits, many deep-sea trenches, and magma reservoirs disturb the magnetic field in this area. Earth's gravity changes in different places around the planet. It allows researchers to look for patterns and figure out what's happening beneath the surface. Higher gravity fields usually mean denser materials below, and vice versa. Some scientists believe that the anomaly might be a dent in the planet's mantle that is working its way up to the crust. The Niihau Island actually rejects the fruits of today's advancements. There are no cars in sight since the locals get around on foot or by bicycles. No wonder their legs have great definition. They thrive without running water, internet, or shops. The only school on the entire island is powered by solar energy with a backup generator. And what's awesome is that it's the only school in the state that's powered by the sun. Being a resident of the island, the local explains some ground rules the permanent residents must abide by. If they do break these rules, they can be evicted. Now, not far from Bangkok, in northeastern Thailand, there's a 75-million-year-old rock formation. These rocks look like 3 whales swimming together. The beautiful design created by nature became known as 3 Whales Rock. Millions of years ago, this area was just a desert, but the land was changing. Gradually, sandstone got pulled apart by the movements of tectonic plates and erosion. That's how these spectacular formations were created. If you decide to explore the system of trails around 3 Whales Rock, you'll find waterfalls and an abundance of fauna and flora there. Located on Gamal and Gaiden peninsulas, these expansive pit holes were discovered in 2014. They seem to be still changing and evolving. The pits grow wider and people find them more often. Of course, there's no shortage of theories about how they appeared. Suggestions range from meteorite impacts to the activity of other civilizations. But the most common explanation is that methane gas reacted to water molecules after the planet's permafrost started to melt. This resulted in bubbles of methane bursting through the ice. The craters could be thousands of years old, but nobody knows for sure. You're driving to the state of New Mexico, to the small town of Taos. 2% of the locals hear a strange buzzing in the air every day. Some residents believe the sound is somehow connected with technologies used by guests from other galaxies. Also, there is a theory that something sinister lives in the town. They say Taos is cursed. An evil spirit or a phantom punishes people for something their ancestors did in the past. Scientists still can't explain the nature of this sound. Another theory says it's caused by unusual acoustics of the location, while others think the buzzing is a hallucination. Some can hear it because everybody talks about something, and our minds create an illusion of the sound that doesn't really exist. The sound isn't the same for everyone either. For some, it's a low hum. For others, it's more of a buzzing sound. But this is not the only place where you can hear the strange noises. It's called the hum, and people worldwide claim to have heard it. Some dwellers of a small village in Scotland describe it as a low, thick hum, while some residents of Florida heard a similar sound too. It's not exactly known where this phenomenon appeared, but the first time the media started talking about it was in the 1970s in England. Also, there are written records of a mysterious buzzing dating back almost 200 years. According to some estimates, only about 2% of people on the planet can hear the hum. Perhaps their ears pick up some low-frequency waves, or the reason is something else entirely. Maybe, just maybe, they hear humming because the person doing it doesn't know the words to the song. Yeah, that joke is also 200 years old. A volcano in Indonesia spews bright blue lava and produces electric blue and purple flames. This phenomenon occurs because the volcano has some of the highest levels of sulfur in the world. You can also know you're near it by its foul stench. But I digress. And when sulfuric gases interact with scorching hot air and get lit by the molten lava, they turn blue. You can also find the world's largest acid lake inside this crater. Yup, it's a real stinker. Underwater rivers and lakes are called brine pools for a reason. High salinity makes the water in them denser than the seawater around. That's why it sinks to the bottom, forming rivers and lakes. Those have waves of their own, and these waves can sometimes lap up against the shorelines. If you went down there in a submarine, it would easily float on the surface of a brine pool. But without a submarine, swimming in such a lake would be too risky. They contain too much toxic methane and hydrogen sulfide. Yeah, I'd pass on that too. But hey, be my guest. Cave of Crystals in Mexico is home to the world's most unique crystal formations. Thanks to super rare conditions in the cave, crystals there grow to unbelievable sizes. The air inside is incredibly humid. The water contains tons of minerals that boost the growth of the Milky White giants. Some of them are longer than telephone poles. Cylindrical snow donuts occur when a wind gust starts to roll some snow across a snowy area, as if making a snowball. If it was a real thing, it would eventually become too heavy for the wind to move. But a snow donut's center is hollowed out. This happens because its inner layer is too thin and is blown away when the donut is formed. This makes the thing lighter than a snowball. That's also why it rolls further. Unfortunately, snow donuts are rare because they need very precise conditions to appear. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is probably one of the most bizarre-looking places you'll ever see. It's dotted with neon-colored hot springs, lava pools, and vast salt flats. You've got to be especially careful there. Toxic gases are swirling over hydrothermal fields, and many pools are super acidic. So, don't go swimming. Until at least 30 minutes after lunch. Just kidding. And finally, there's nothing mysterious about 28,000 rubber ducks found in the sea in 1992. That's when a ship transporting bath toys got lost in the ocean while traveling from Hong Kong to the U.S. Some of these ducks are still floating in the ocean several decades later. They've been spotted in South America, Alaska, Hawaii, and even Australia. And they make bath time lots of fun. Ooh, rubber ducky.
Something interesting has recently happened in South Dakota. It was all over the internet, so perhaps you already know about it. In July of 2022, the sky in this state suddenly turned green. So, what happened there? Was it caused by a human or by nature? Let's find out. Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Shortly after a heavy storm, the sky over South Dakota in the U.S. was still overcast. Locals finally went outside and saw that the sky had an intense dark green hue, and they'd never seen anything like that before. People said that it looked like something straight up from science fiction, or even a horror movie. Unsurprisingly, South Dakotans immediately started spreading the news all over social media. People shared their beautiful, yet very eerie pictures on Twitter. They showed the sky over the city of Sioux Falls and a few other towns. Even though it may look like something supernatural, in reality, this is not a terrifying phenomenon at all. It's a simple play of the light and the atmosphere. Something like this happens quite rarely, and usually means that really bad weather is approaching. And that's also true to what happened in South Dakota. Just before people started sharing photos, a thunderstorm swept through the town of Sioux Falls. This was confirmed by the U.S. Weather Service. This hurricane was terrible. The wind speed was about 100 miles per hour. According to the Beaufort scale on wind speeds, this is the fastest and most destructive storm. There are only 12 numbers on this scale, and the maximum wind strength starts at 73 miles per hour. But why isn't this all over the news then? Well, because it's kind of a usual thing for the residents. Thunderstorms occur very often in the United States, especially in the warmer months. And 1 out of 10 such thunderstorms can become something serious, like a tornado. This one wasn't an exception. It was the so-called Derecho storm. Derecho is very widespread and long-lived. It's actually a combination of a fast-moving group of severe thunderstorms and downpours. People often say that a derecho is as strong as a tornado. Still, there's a difference between them. A tornado is a vortex, a rotating column of air. It's usually about 500 feet in diameter, although sometimes its width can reach up to 2.5 miles. I don't envy those who would stumble upon that. But the main point is that they rotate. The wind moves very fast in a circle, near some invisible center. A derecho is a strong thunderstorm, or a system of strong thunderstorms with straight-line winds. In other words, it doesn't spin. Instead, the Draco chooses a point somewhere and simply runs to it, like a very motivated marathon runner. If we compare a Draco to an ordinary tornado, the latter has 6 levels of strength, from 40 to 380 miles per hour. So a Draco is kind of like a small, average level 1 to 2 tornado. Usually its speed is within the range of 73 to 113 miles per hour. And in both cases, they can be accompanied by severe thunderstorms, lightning, and rain. But still, these are different things. A storm becomes a Draco if the damage trail left by it exceeds 240 miles, and if the wind speed is at least 58 miles per hour. It's quite difficult to predict. It can form even on a clear day, when meteorologists don't even anticipate any storms. And then, the winds appear suddenly. It's so surprising that they may even feel explosive. But the National Weather Service tries to warn people at least half an hour or an hour before this happens, so that residents have time to prepare and hide. It wasn't any different this time. The storm swept through almost all of South Dakota, as well as the states of Minnesota and Iowa. The consequences were quite serious. More than 30,000 people were left without electricity. Fortunately, people were fine. That's because the locals are pretty used to Dracos. However, the green sky is something different. It became a very unusual sight for the locals. Everyone was wondering why it happened. Was it a bad sign or a normal weather phenomenon? Well, to be honest, scientists don't have an exact explanation. But although there are only assumptions, they sound pretty convincing. A green sky is a very rare phenomenon. Most scientists think that this happens when a powerful storm approaches the area before sunset or sunrise. Then the sky will turn green in this area. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns, who once faced a similar event himself, suggests that the green sky appeared because of the huge hail before the storm. First, let's talk about why the sky looks blue, or any other shade, depending on its mood. In short, the sun simultaneously carries all the rays of the color spectrum. It may seem white to us in total, but it actually has all the colors at the same time. However, these color waves all have different lengths. For example, blue rays are shorter than the other ones. They jump away from the air molecules better than the red waves, so they reach us faster. Because of this, on a regular clear day, the sky seems blue. At the same time, red and orange color waves are very long and move slower, so they're usually left behind. But when the sun goes below the horizon or rises, the rays' directions change, and these waves reach us better. It all means that even if the sunrises and sunsets seem red and orange to us, in fact, there are still blue and green waves among them. But they have to bounce off something to reach us faster and become stronger than the red rays. Have you guessed what I'm getting at? This is where the water comes into play. Clouds are made up of water droplets. When they become large enough, but don't fall yet, for example, due to strong winds, they affect how the light behaves in the sky. Large, heavy storms mostly consist of water and hail, and water reflects blue and green rays best of all. That's exactly the reason why the water in rivers and lakes seems bluish-green to us, although in reality, it's transparent. And yeah, algae matter too. So, there are a couple of key factors why the sky may turn green. First off, the sun should be at the horizon level. Another factor is that while the storm clouds are approaching, they shouldn't cover the sky completely. There still must be a little room for the sun rays. Then, barely noticeable blue rays jump up to storm clouds. They're repelled by water droplets and hail. Mixing with the red sunset, they turn into a bright green light. And this green light is spreading all over the sky. That's why in most of these cases, when the sky turns green, people can only see it in the evenings. Yeah, it can also happen in the middle of the day. But since the conditions are already quite specific, seeing something like that during the day is even rarer. Still, if you see a green sky, you don't need to panic. It doesn't necessarily mean that a terrible storm is approaching. The chances are high though, but still, it's not a rule. It can be just heavy rain or a heavy hail. In other words, if you see a green sky, then you'd better hide, and hide your car. However, if you were lucky enough to see the stunning sky from the comfort of your own home, it's indeed very exciting. If you get a glimpse of something like that, just know that you had a chance to experience something very rare and special. Some people said